The earliest unsolved mystery predates the Erdtree itself, tied to the enigmatic great tree that once stood in its place, a primordial colossus whose existence is whispered about in item descriptions and hinted at through architectural remnants, yet never fully explained or acknowledged by the Golden Order that rose to erase it from history. This is not merely an academic curiosity or a footnote in the lore of the lands between. The great tree represents the first of many deliberate obscurations, the initial thread in a tapestry of secrets that winds through every age of Elden Ring's world, from the cosmic manipulations that birthed the Erdtree to the shadowed conspiracies that shattered the Elden Ring itself. Shadow of the Erdtree, the expansion that promised answers, instead deepened the enigma, introducing new questions that interlock with old ones in ways that suggest a grand design we can only partially perceive. There are mysteries here that From Software has left intentionally unresolved, gaps in the narrative where the community has theorized for thousands of hours, yet reached no consensus, places where the game's own internal logic seems to contradict itself or fall silent. Some of these mysteries concern the nature of divinity itself, the true relationship between the greater will and the forces that oppose it. Others involve characters whose motivations remain opaque despite our encounters with them, whose allegiances shift in ways that defy easy categorization. There are locations in the lands between and the land of shadow that exist in defiance of known geography, timelines that refuse to align, and events that multiple sources describe in contradictory terms. The DLC added entire cosmological layers to questions we thought we understood, revealing that the Golden Order's history was even more carefully curated, even more selectively told than the base game suggested. What did Marika truly know about the civilization that came before her ascension? Why does the Shadow Realm exist in the specific form it takes, neither fully separate from the lands between nor fully integrated with it? What is the significance of the eclipse that never came, the celestial event that multiple quest lines reference, but that never occurs within the game's observable timeline? Who or what is manipulating events from behind even the greater will's throne? And why do certain demigods seem aware of narrative layers that others cannot perceive? The shattering itself, the cataclysm that sets the entire game in motion, contains contradictions that Shadow of the Erdtree highlighted rather than resolved. We know the Night of the Black Knives triggered the war, but the DLC revealed connections between that assassination and forces operating in the Land of Shadow, suggesting the conspiracy went deeper and wider than previously understood, implicating factions we had not associated with Godwin's death. Michaela's fate, which the expansion was meant to clarify, instead opened new questions about his nature, his intentions, and whether the being we encounter is truly the Empyrean we were searching for, or something that has taken his place, transformed him, or represents only one facet of a divided existence. The game presents us with multiple Michaelas, multiple timelines of his development, and no clear indication of which version is authoritative or whether they all somehow coexist. Then there are the environmental mysteries, the architectural impossibilities, the places where the Land of Shadow's geography seems to fold back on itself or connect to locations in the base game in ways that violate spatial logic. There are items that reference events no NPC ever mentions, characters who appear in multiple time periods without explanation, and symbols that recur across cultures separated by ages, suggesting either a cyclical history or a manipulation of time itself that the game never makes explicit. The Tarnished's own role in this web of mysteries is itself unresolved. Are you truly an agent of free will, or are your actions as choreographed as those of the demigods you defeat? The game hints at meta-narrative layers, at forces that operate beyond the diegetic world, but never confirms or denies their existence. Some mysteries seem designed to have answers that attentive players can deduce, puzzles with solutions hidden in item placement and dialogue trees. Others appear to be genuine ambiguities, places where From Software deliberately left the story open to interpretation, where multiple contradictory readings are equally valid and equally supported by in game evidence. And then there are the mysteries that feel like oversights, like narrative threads that were meant to be resolved but were cut or altered in development, leaving behind vestigial references that point nowhere. Distinguishing between these categories, between intentional ambiguity and accidental inconsistency, between hidden answers and genuine absences, is itself one of the great challenges of Elden Ring's lore community. Shadow of the Erdtree was supposed to be the revelation, the expansion that would shine light into the darkest corners of the mythos. In some ways, it succeeded, providing concrete answers to questions about Marika's origins, about the nature of the Horn-sent civilization, about the mechanism by which the Erdtree was established. But for every answer it provided, it introduced new questions, and some of its revelations contradicted or complicated what we thought we knew from the base game. The expansion's very existence raises questions about canon and continuity. Are we meant to reinterpret the base game's events in light of the DLC's revelations, or does the Land of Shadow represent an alternate or parallel narrative? The game never tells us. The community remains divided on fundamental questions of interpretation, on whether certain characters are reliable narrators, on whether the game's cosmology operates on symbolic or literal principles, on whether time in the lands between functions linearly or in some more complex fashion. These are not small disagreements about minor details. They are fundamental divergences in how we understand the game's reality, what kind of world the lands between is, what rules govern its existence. And beneath all of these specific mysteries lies a larger question that Shadow of the Erdtree brought into sharp focus but did not answer. What is From Software's intent? Are these gaps in the narrative deliberate invitations to imagination, spaces where players are meant to construct their own interpretations? Are they puzzles with canonical solutions that we simply have not discovered yet, answers hidden so deep in the game's systems that they require collaboration across the entire community to unearth? Or are they, in some cases, simply the inevitable inconsistencies that arise in a work of this complexity, a sprawling dark fantasy epic created by hundreds of people over years of development, where not every thread could be perfectly woven? The game itself seems to resist definitive answers to this meta-question, presenting its mysteries with such confidence that they feel intentional, yet withholding the tools that would allow us to solve them with certainty. There are secrets in Elden Ring that may never be solved, not because the community lacks dedication or insight, but because the game, before the Golden Order, before the Erdtree's radiant glow, illuminated the lands between, there existed something older. In the prehistory of this world, in an age so distant that even the gods who would later claim dominion had not yet risen to power, the Great Tree stood as the axis upon which all life turned. This was the pre-Erdtree era, a time when the very foundations of existence were being laid, when the first civilizations looked upward at branches that seemed to pierce the heavens themselves, and knew they stood in the presence of something divine. The Great Tree emerged from the primordial earth as a colossal, arboreal entity, dwarfing anything that would come after. Where it came from, whether it grew from a seed planted by forces unknown, or whether it simply manifested as the world itself took shape, remains one of the deepest mysteries in all of Elden Ring's history. What we do know is that this was no ordinary tree. The Great Tree possessed a scale that defied comprehension, its trunk wider than castles, its roots deeper than the deepest chasms, its branches stretching across horizons. To the beings who witnessed its emergence, the Great Tree must have appeared as the very embodiment of life itself, a living monument to growth, vitality, and the cycle of existence. The ancient civilizations that arose in this primordial age looked upon the Great Tree with reverence that bordered on absolute devotion. Among these early peoples, the inhabitants of what would later be known as crumbling Farum Azula stand out as perhaps the most devoted worshippers of this great entity. Farum Azula, in this distant age, was not the ruined, time shattered fragment floating in a storm that you encounter in the game. It was whole, magnificent, a city of stone and faith built upon principles that predated everything the Golden Order would later establish. The architecture of this ancient civilization tells us volumes about their relationship with the Great Tree. Every temple, every grand hall, every ceremonial space was oriented toward the worship of this massive living entity. The iconography found throughout crumbling Farum Azula provides our clearest window into how these ancient peoples understood the Great Tree. Stone carvings depict a tree of impossible size, its branches bearing what appear to be golden leaves or perhaps flames. Murals show processions of figures, both human and beast, bringing offerings to the tree's base. Statues positioned at key points throughout the city face outward, as if keeping eternal vigil over the great tree's domain. This was not casual worship or simple nature reverence. The great tree occupied the absolute center of their belief system, the foundation upon which their entire cosmology rested. Every ritual, every prayer, every sacrifice was ultimately directed toward or through this colossal entity. What made the great tree worthy of such devotion becomes clearer when we examine what it actually was, what it did. The roots of the great tree extended deep into the earth, far deeper than any normal tree could possibly reach. These roots did not simply anchor the tree. They spread outwards and downward, forming vast subterranean networks that penetrated every layer of the world. These root systems created enormous caverns, carved channels through solid stone, and established connections between regions that appeared completely separate on the surface. The areas that would later become known as the deep root depths were formed by these ancient root networks. When you explore those dark, waterlogged caverns in the game, when you walk among roots the size of buildings, you are traversing pathways that were established in this primordial age, before history itself began to be recorded. The beastmen of Farum Azula, those powerful warriors covered in stone-like skin who wield weapons imbued with ancient power, were the primary servants and guardians of the Great Tree's worship. Under the rule of Dragon Lord Placidusax, who reigned as Elden Lord in this ancient time before the age of the Erdtree, the beastmen maintained temples, conducted rituals, and defended the sacred sites associated with the Great Tree. Placidusax himself, a massive dragon with multiple heads who served as lord before the coming of the Golden Order, may have derived his authority, at least in part, from his connection to the Great Tree. The relationship between the dragons, the beastmen, and the Great Tree formed a triangular power structure that defined this entire era. The dragons provided raw power and divine authority. The beastmen provided martial strength and devoted service. And the Great Tree provided the fundamental life force that sustained everything. The Great Tree's influence was not limited to Farum Azula or any single region. Its roots connected distant parts of the lands between in ways that would have profound implications for everything that came after. Beneath Lanedell, beneath Limgrave, beneath the mountaintops of the giants, these roots spread and intertwined. They created a hidden geography, a subterranean world that mirrored and supported the surface world. In some places, the roots broke through to the surface, creating groves and sacred sites where the barrier between earth and sky seemed thin. In other places, they remained hidden, their presence marked only by unusual fertility, by springs that never ran dry, by forests that grew with unnatural vigor. The power that flowed through the Great Tree may have represented a primordial form of what would later be codified as the Golden Order. This is speculation, but the evidence suggests that the fundamental principles that would later be systematized and enforced by Queen Marika and the Elden Ring already existed in some nascent form during the age of the Great Tree. The idea of a natural order, of cycles of life and death governed by higher laws, of blessings flowing from a divine source to the world below, all of these concepts appear to have their roots in Great Tree worship. The key difference was that this earlier system was less rigid, less dogmatic, more organic. Where the Golden Order would later impose strict hierarchies and absolute rules, the Great Tree's influence operated more like a natural force, powerful but not tyrannical. The sap or essence of the Great Tree possessed properties that the ancient peoples recognized as sacred and life giving. References found in item descriptions and environmental storytelling suggest that this essence could heal wounds, extend life, and even grant visions or insights to those who consumed it. This is remarkably similar to the blessings that the Erdtree would later provide, the golden light that heals and empowers those who serve the Golden Order. The parallel is too strong to be coincidental. It suggests that the Erdtree, when it eventually emerged, either inherited these properties from the Great Tree or deliberately mimicked them to establish legitimacy. The golden sap that flows from the Erdtree in the age you explore may be an echo or evolution of the essence that once flowed from the Great Tree's bark. The ancient peoples developed burial practices centered around the Great Tree that reveal how deeply it was integrated into their understanding of life and death. Rather than burning their dead or entombing them in stone crypts, they brought the deceased to the Great Tree's roots and interred them within the earth where those roots grew thickest. This was not simply disposal of the dead, it was a sacred act, a return of the body to the source of all life. The belief, as far as we can reconstruct it, was that the dead would be absorbed by the roots, their essence drawn up into the tree itself, and in some way incorporated into the ongoing cycle of life. The bodies would nourish the tree, and the tree would transform that nourishment into new life, new growth, new blessings for the living. This practice would later be adopted and adapted by the Erdtree, which also drew the dead into its roots, though whether for the same purpose remains a matter of debate. The sheer physical presence of the Great Tree shaped the world in ways both literal and metaphorical. Its canopy, spreading outward from a trunk of unimaginable girth, may have once covered vast portions of the sky. Imagine standing in the lands between during this age and looking upward to see not open sky but an endless ceiling of golden leaves, branches as thick as rivers crossing overhead, a living roof that filtered sunlight into a perpetual golden twilight. The shadows cast by the Great Tree would have been equally immense, creating zones of permanent shade where different forms of life adapted to the reduced light. The climate itself may have been influenced by the tree's presence, with patterns of rainfall and temperature determined by where the canopy was thickest and where gaps allowed full sunlight to reach the earth. Yet the Great Tree's dominion, for all its ancient majesty, was not destined to endure unchallenged. As the ages turned, conflict began to fester among those who dwelt beneath its boughs. The power that radiated from the great trunk, the life-giving essence that sustained the lands between, became an object of bitter contention. Factions emerged, each seeking to claim dominion over the tree's might for their own purposes. Among these were beings of tremendous power, creatures that would later be remembered as the first demigods, though their forms and allegiances in this primordial age remain shrouded in mystery. The dragons, too, those ancient lords of stone and storm who commanded the sky long before the rise of any human kingdom, coveted the Great Tree's influence. Their civilization, built upon principles of communion with the ancient dragons and the harnessing of red lightning, saw in the Great Tree both a resource and a rival source of cosmic authority. The exact nature of these conflicts is lost to the depths of prehistory, yet their consequences carved themselves into the very fabric of the world. Battles raged not merely for territory, but for the fundamental right to shape reality itself. The great tree's power was not simply strength or longevity, it was the ability to define the laws by which life and death operated, to determine which souls would return to the tree and which would be cast into outer darkness. Those who controlled such power could reshape the world according to their vision, and so the struggle intensified. The dragons, under the leadership of their most powerful lords, may have sought to bind the great tree to their own order, to make it an extension of their eternal kingdom of stone. Other factions, perhaps early human or giant civilizations, fought to preserve the tree's independence or to claim it for their own nascent pantheons. As these conflicts ground on through countless generations, the great tree itself began to change. The first signs were subtle, a slight dulling of the golden luminescence that had once made its leaves shine like captured sunlight. Observers, those few wise enough to watch and patient enough to notice changes that unfolded over centuries, saw the bark begin to darken. Where once it had been pale and smooth, almost luminous in its perfection, it now took on a deeper, more weathered hue. The color shifted from gold and cream toward something earthier, a brown that spoke of age and weariness. The leaves, those countless millions that had formed a canopy vast enough to shade entire kingdoms, began to wither at their edges. They curled and browned, and when they fell, they did not dissolve into motes of light as they once had, but instead crumbled into ash and dust. This decline was not merely aesthetic. The great tree's weakening manifested in the world itself. The flows of vital energy that had once coursed through the land like rivers began to slow and stagnate. Creatures that had thrived under the tree's blessing found themselves struggling. The very soil seemed less fertile, the waters less pure. Scholars of that forgotten age, if such existed, would have recognized these as symptoms of a fundamental sickness, a corruption eating away at the tree from within, or perhaps an exhaustion of its finite reserves of power. The great tree, for all its might, was not truly eternal. It was a living thing, and like all living things, it could sicken and die. During these twilight years of the great tree's reign, the dragon lord Placidusax held the title of Elden Lord. This ancient being, a dragon of unparalleled power, possessing not 2 but 5 heads in his prime, stood as the consort to a god whose identity has been utterly erased from history. The role of Elden Lord, even in this primordial age, signified more than mere rulership. It represented a sacred bond between the mortal realm and the divine, a partnership through which cosmic order was maintained and enforced. Placidusax, from his seat of power in what would later be known as Farum Azula, that crumbling temple city suspended beyond time itself, presided over the great tree's final days. Whether he witnessed the tree's decline with sorrow or indifference, whether he fought to preserve it or accepted its fate as inevitable, we cannot know. What is certain is that his god, the deity to whom he had pledged his eternal service, fled, abandoned his post, left the world behind. This abandonment may itself be connected to the great tree's fate. Perhaps the god fled because the tree's death was imminent and unstoppable. Perhaps the god's departure was the cause of the tree's decline, a withdrawal of divine sustenance that left the great tree to wither without its patron's support. Or perhaps both the god's flight and the tree's death were symptoms of a larger catastrophe, a cosmic upheaval that shattered the old order and cleared the way for what was to come. Placidusax, bereft of his god, would retreat into a space beyond time itself, waiting in eternal vigil for a return that would never come, his very existence becoming a monument to loss and fading glory. The catastrophic event that finally ended the age of the great tree remains one of the most profound mysteries in the Lands Between's history. Some fragments of evidence suggest the involvement of the Elden Beast, that living incarnation of the Elden Ring itself, a golden cosmic entity sent by the Greater Will to serve as its instrument in the mortal world. The Elden Beast's arrival, if indeed it occurred during this period, would have represented an intervention by the supreme outer God, the greater will which sought to impose its own order upon the lands between. The beast may have been sent specifically to supplant the great tree, to destroy or transform it so that a new vessel for the greater will's power could take root. This would explain the Erdtree's emergence, not as a natural succession, but as a deliberate replacement, an artificial construct designed to serve the greater will's purposes more directly than the wild primordial great tree ever could. Alternatively, another outer god entirely may have been responsible. The lands between have always been contested ground for cosmic powers, each seeking to extend their influence through mortal agents and divine artifacts. The formless mother, the frenzied flame, the god of rot, these and other entities have all left their marks upon the world. Perhaps one of these powers struck at the great tree, seeking to eliminate a rival source of cosmic authority. The resulting conflict would have been cataclysmic, a war not of armies, but of fundamental forces, reality itself buckling under the strain of clashing divine wills. What is certain is that the great tree did not simply fade away. Its end was violent, transformative, and absolute. Whether it was destroyed outright, reduced to ash and memory, or whether it underwent a metamorphosis, its essence consumed and reshaped into something new, the result was the same. Where the great tree had stood, the Erdtree now rose. This new tree, golden and radiant, towered even higher than its predecessor. Its light was not the warm, natural glow of the great tree, but something more refined, more ordered, more deliberately divine. The Erdtree was not a product of nature, but of will, a cosmic architecture designed to serve as the centerpiece of a new age. This was the age of the Erdtree, the era of Marika's golden order, a time when law and grace would be imposed from above rather than growing organically from below. The Erdtree's emergence marked a fundamental shift in the nature of reality in the lands between. The old ways, the ancient cycles that had governed life under the great tree, were swept away. In their place came Marika's order, a system of absolute rules enforced by divine mandate. Death itself was bound and controlled, no longer a natural transition, but a process regulated by the Erdtree's grace. Those who lived in grace would return to the tree upon death, their souls recycled back into the world. Those outside grace were condemned to true death, their spirits lost forever. Yet the great tree, though gone, was not entirely erased. Its roots, those massive tendrils that had burrowed deep into the earth over countless ages, could not simply be removed. They remained, buried far beneath the surface, forming a vast underground network of tunnels and caverns. These became known as the deep-root depths, a labyrinthine realm of darkness and forgotten history. Here, in the spaces between the roots, water pooled and ancient things lingered. The deep-root depths became a repository of the old world, a place where the past persisted even as the surface above was remade according to new principles. The Nox, those enigmatic people who would later be banished underground for their transgressions against the greater will, may have been among the last cultures to witness the great tree in its final days. Their ancestors, dwelling in cities that still stood beneath open sky, would have watched the great tree's decline and the Erdtree's rise. Whether they mourned the great tree's passing or welcomed the new order, their civilization would eventually come into conflict with the Golden Order, resulting in their exile to the eternal night of the underground realms. The great tree's death left behind more than just roots. Relics and artifacts remained, physical remnants of its existence. Root resin, a crystallized sap found throughout the deep-root depths, preserves something of the tree's essence. These amber-like fragments glow faintly with residual power, sought after by those who craft items and understand the old ways. Other artifacts, Weapons and talismans bearing the mark of the ancient tree surface occasionally, each one a testament to the great tree's reality and its enduring influence. Most significantly, the great tree's roots continue to harbor life. The ancestral followers, those shamanic warriors who serve the spirits of the ancient past, dwell in the depths near the old roots. They remember, in their way, the great tree's legacy. Their rituals and their reverence for the ancestral spirits suggest a continuity of worship that predates the Golden Order, a faith that survived the transition from one cosmic age to another by retreating into the depths where the Erdtree's light does not reach. As the Erdtree's golden boughs spread ever wider across the lands between, they cast long shadows over the history that came before. The great tree's story, once perhaps sung in the halls of ancient civilizations, became progressively harder to discern. The Erdtree's growth was not merely physical, but ideological, a rewriting of the world's spiritual landscape that buried older truths beneath layers of golden dogma. Scholars of the Golden Order, those who served Marika and her divine mandate, had little incentive to preserve records of what preceded their goddess's reign. The Great Tree, if acknowledged at all, was reduced to a footnote, a primitive precursor to the perfection of the Erdtree. Its vast root network, its connection to the crucible of life itself, all of this faded from common knowledge as generations passed under the Golden Order's rule. Yet the physical remnants of the Great Tree could not be so easily erased. Deep beneath the surface world, in the sprawling caverns known as the deep root depths, the Great Tree's massive roots still twisted through stone and earth. These depths became a refuge for those the Golden Order rejected, particularly those who live in death, the undead who persisted beyond the natural cycle that Marika had established. These beings, cursed or blessed depending on one's perspective with the form of immortality that defied the Erdtree's laws, found sanctuary among the ancient roots. The Great Tree's remnants seemed to accept them where the Erdtree would not. Godwin the Golden's corpse would eventually come to rest here, his body merging with the roots in a grotesque union that spawned the Deathroot and spread the curse of undeath throughout the lands between. The Great Tree's roots, perhaps still holding some echo of their original purpose as conduits of life, became vectors for this new form of existence that blurred the line between life and death. The connection between the Great Tree and other great trees of the lands between raises profound questions about the nature of these living monuments. The Halig tree, Michaela's attempt to create an alternative to the Erdtree, shares certain characteristics with the Great Tree that cannot be mere coincidence. Both possess roots that delve deep into the earth, seeking something fundamental in the world's substrate. Both seem to offer sanctuary to those rejected by the Golden Order, the Halig tree sheltering the Albinaurics and other outcasts, just as the Great Tree's depths harbor the undead. Some scholars of forbidden lore have suggested that Michaela, in his research into alternatives to his mother's order, discovered fragments of knowledge about the Great Tree. Perhaps he studied its structure, its relationship to the crucible, and attempted to recreate something of its original nature. The Halig tree's failure to reach maturity, its perpetual state of becoming rather than being, might reflect the impossibility of truly resurrecting what the Great Tree represented. Or perhaps it suggests that the Great Tree's power was never meant to be replicated, that it was unique to its age and could not be called forth again in an era dominated by the Greater Will's influence. The few fragments of the Great Tree's history that survived into the age of the Erdtree exist in the most unlikely of places. Farum Azula, the crumbling tempest city that exists outside of time itself, preserves carvings and texts that predate even the earliest days of Marika's reign. Among the weathered stone tablets and faded murals, there are images of a great tree whose roots spread not just through earth, but through the very fabric of existence. These carvings show the tree as a cosmic axis, a connection between the heavens and the underworld, with no mention of an Elden Ring or a greater will. Instead, The imagery suggests a more primal cosmology, one where the tree itself was the source of order rather than a vessel for an external power. The beastmen who once inhabited Far Missoula, servants of the ancient dragons and keepers of their own form of divine authority, may have witnessed the Great Tree's era firsthand. Their civilization's records, fragmentary as they are, hint at a time when multiple forms of power coexisted in the world before the greater will's consolidation of authority under the Erdtree's branches. The question of how the Great Tree met its end, or whether it truly ended at all, remains one of the most contested mysteries among those who study the deep history of the lands between. Some believe that Marika herself orchestrated the Great Tree's demise or transformation as part of her ascension to godhood. In this interpretation, the Erd Tree is not a separate entity, but rather the Great Tree itself, reshaped and repurposed to serve the greater will's design. The act of transforming the Great Tree would have required immense power, perhaps the very power that Marika gained when she became a vessel for the Elden Ring. By remaking the world's spiritual center in the image of the greater will's order, she would have effectively rewritten reality itself, ensuring that all life in the lands between would henceforth be bound to the Golden Order's principles. Others argue that the greater will itself supplanted the Great Tree through some cosmic struggle, that the Erd Tree's arrival marked a conquest rather than a transformation. In this reading, the Great Tree's roots persist as a kind of resistance, a reminder of an older power that refuses to be completely subsumed. The ancestral followers, those enigmatic shamans who dwell in the Siofra River and Ainsel River regions far below the surface, maintain rituals that seem to draw upon the Great Tree's lingering presence. These followers, who worship the spirits of their ancestors and the primal forces of nature, perform ceremonies among the roots that still wind through their subterranean domains. They speak of the roots as living conduits of memory, channels through which the wisdom of ages past can still be accessed by those who know how to listen. Their rituals involve meditation in the presence of the roots, a practice they claim allows them to hear whispers of forgotten truths, knowledge that predates the Golden Order and even the Age of the Dragons. These whispers, according to the ancestral followers, reveal a time when death was not an ending, but a transformation, when souls returned to the earth to nourish new life in an endless cycle. This vision stands in stark contrast to the Golden Order's system, where souls are drawn to the Erd Tree and recycled according to Marika's design, with some souls deemed worthy of return and others cast aside. The age of the Great Tree, as it fades into the mists of prehistory, is remembered by those few who preserve such knowledge as a time of primal forces, an era before the rigid hierarchies and strict categorizations of the Golden Order. It was a time when the world was wilder, more dangerous perhaps, but also more free. The crucible, that churning mixture of life from which all things emerged, was not yet viewed as a shameful origin to be hidden, but rather as the source of vitality itself. Beings born with aspects of the crucible, those who bore horns or wings or other features that would later be deemed omen curses, were not outcasts, but simply part of the world's natural diversity. The Great Tree's era knew no distinction between pure and impure, between blessed and cursed. Life in all its chaotic variety was accepted as part of the great cycle, the endless dance of growth and decay that the tree itself embodied. Even now, in the age of the Erd Tree's dominance, traces of the Great Tree's influence persist in ways both subtle and profound. The minor spirits that inhabit the roots of the Erd Tree, the strange entities that seem neither fully alive nor dead, may be remnants of the Great Tree's original nature. These root spirits, encountered in the depths beneath the Erd Tree and in the catacombs scattered throughout the lands between, behave differently from other creatures of the Golden Order. They seem to operate according to older principles, responding to intrusions into their domain with an almost instinctive defensiveness that predates conscious thought. The secrets buried within the Erdtree's root system, the hidden chambers and forgotten passages that wind through its subterranean network, often contain relics and knowledge that feel out of place in Marika's carefully ordered world. These are the Great Tree's legacy, pockets of older truth that survived the transformation, waiting for those brave or foolish enough to seek them out. As the age of the Great Tree recedes into myth, it leaves behind only scattered clues and crumbling ruins. The full truth of what it represented, how it functioned, and why it gave way to the Erd Tree may never be fully known. What remains are fragments, pieces of a puzzle that can be assembled in multiple ways, depending on one's perspective and the evidence one chooses to emphasize. Perhaps this ambiguity is itself meaningful, a reflection of the Great Tree's nature as something that existed before the greater will imposed its singular vision of order upon the world. The Great Tree's story, incomplete and contradictory as it is, stands as a reminder that the Golden Order, for all its claims to eternal truth, is merely one chapter in a much longer history. As the age of the Great Tree fades into memory and the world transforms under the influence of the greater will, we arrive at the early Erd Tree era, the time of the Golden Order's founding. This is the epoch when Queen Marika the Eternal consolidates her divine authority and reshapes the very fabric of reality in the lands between. It is also the moment when the mysteries we seek to unravel truly begin. The Erd Tree emerges not merely as a tree, but as the central axis of existence itself, rising from the heart of the lands between. This colossal golden structure becomes the source of grace, the font of immortality, and the visible manifestation of the greater will's design. Its roots burrow deep into the earth, drawing upon something ancient and primordial, while its canopy spreads across the sky, bathing the realm in radiant light. The Erd Tree is more than a symbol. It is a living conduit through which souls are returned to its roots upon death, only to be reborn again in an endless cycle. This is the gift Marika offers to her subjects, a promise of eternal life within the embrace of the Golden Order. Queen Marika stands at the pinnacle of this new world. Chosen by the greater will and bonded to the Elden Ring, she wields authority that transcends mortal comprehension. Through her divine mandate, Marika establishes the Golden Order, a cosmic law that governs not just the political structure of the realm, but the fundamental rules of life, death, and fate itself. The Golden Order is both religion and reality, a metaphysical framework that determines how souls flow, how grace is distributed, and how order is maintained. Under Marika's rule, the fractured kingdoms and warring factions of the lands between are brought to heel. The age of chaos gives way to an age of structure. The Erd Tree becomes the unifying icon, visible from every corner of the realm, a constant reminder of Marika's dominion and the greater will's presence. Yet even in this golden age of unity and divine light, something curious begins to trouble the scholars and theologians who serve the order. Ancient texts, some predating even Marika's ascension, make reference to a shadow, not the ordinary absence of light that any object might cast, but something specific, something tied intrinsically to the Erd Tree itself. These references are fragmentary, often poetic, and maddeningly vague. They speak of a shadow that moves independently, a darkness that exists not in opposition to the light, but as its necessary complement. The texts describe this shadow as being cast by the Erd Tree, yet also suggest it possesses its own geography, its own inhabitants, perhaps even its own laws. The scholarly community fractures over how to interpret these cryptic passages. One school of thought, the literalists, argues that the shadow is exactly what the name implies. They propose that the Erd Tree, being an object of immense physical presence, must cast a corresponding shadow of equally immense proportions. In their view, this shadow is a literal dark counterpart to the Erd Tree's radiance, a region of perpetual twilight or darkness that exists somewhere in the physical world. Some literalists point to unexplored regions beyond the lands between, suggesting that the shadow falls across distant lands that have yet to be mapped or understood. Others propose that the shadow exists within the lands between itself, perhaps hidden in the deepest valleys or most remote corners where the Erdtree's light cannot reach. The second major school of interpretation takes a more metaphysical approach. These scholars propose that the shadow represents a parallel spiritual realm, a dimension that exists alongside the physical world but operates according to different principles. In this theory, the shadow is not a place you can walk to, but a state of being, a layer of reality that overlaps with our own. They draw parallels to other known phenomena in the lands between, such as the spectral realm glimpsed through spirit ashes, the ash summons that allow warriors to call forth phantoms of the dead, or the strange twilight spaces where the boundaries between life and death grow thin. According to this interpretation, the Erdtree exists simultaneously in multiple dimensions, casting its influence across both the material world and the shadow realm, and what we perceive as a single tree is merely the visible portion of a far more complex cosmic structure. Both theories gain adherents among the Golden Order's intellectuals, but neither can be proven or disproven with the evidence available. The debate remains academic, a puzzle for theologians to contemplate in the safety of their libraries. That is, until events begin to unfold that give the question of the shadow a terrible urgency. During this same foundational period of the Golden Order, a figure emerges who will shake the very foundations of Marika's carefully constructed reality. She is known as the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and she rises to power wielding something that should not exist in Marika's new world. That something is destined to death, the principle of true mortality, the power to kill not just the body, but the soul itself, severing it permanently from the Erdtree's cycle of rebirth. Destined death is the ultimate transgression against the Golden Order's promise of immortality, and the Gloam-Eyed Queen commands it with terrifying mastery. The origins of the Gloam-Eyed Queen remain obscure. Some accounts suggest she was an Empyrean, a being chosen by the Two Fingers as a potential vessel for the greater will, just as Marika herself had been. If true, this would make her Marika's equal in potential, if not in actual power. Other sources hint at a connection to the ancient practices that predated the Erdtree, suggesting she might have inherited her authority from the age of the Great Tree or even earlier epochs. What is certain is that she commands a devoted following, warriors who wield black flames and carry out her will with fanatical dedication. These are the Godskin Apostles and Godskin Nobles, figures who would become legendary for their ability to hunt and slay gods themselves, stripping the skin from divine beings and wearing it as raiment. It is at this point that the question of the Erdtree's shadow transforms from academic curiosity to urgent political and theological concern. Scholars and mystics begin to notice apparent connections between the Gloam-Eyed Queen and the shadow spoken of in the ancient texts. Her title itself invokes twilight, that liminal time between day and night, between light and shadow. The gloam is the hour when the sun's light fades and darkness begins to assert itself. Is this merely poetic coincidence, or does it signify something deeper? Some theorists propose that the Gloam-Eyed Queen draws her power from the shadow realm itself, that she has found a way to tap into the Erdtree's dark counterpart and extract from it the one thing Marika sought to eliminate from the world. Destined death, in this interpretation, is the shadow's gift, the necessary balance to the Erdtree's promise of eternal life. Others suggest an even more disturbing possibility. Perhaps the Gloam-Eyed Queen is not merely connected to the shadow, but is its avatar, its chosen representative in the physical world, just as Marika represents the Erdtree's light. If the shadow is indeed a parallel spiritual realm, or a dark counterpart to the Erdtree, it stands to reason that it might have its own will, its own agenda, and its own chosen vessel. The gloam-eyed queen in this view is the shadow made manifest, the inevitable response to Marika's attempt to create a world of pure order and eternal light. Whatever the truth of her origins and her connection to the shadow, the Golden Order cannot tolerate her existence. Marika declares the gloam-eyed queen a heretic, an enemy of the divine order, and a threat to the very structure of reality. The charge is not merely political, but ontological. By wielding destined death, the gloam-eyed queen offers an alternative to Marika's vision, a path that acknowledges true endings, genuine mortality, and the possibility of escaping the Erdtree's eternal cycle. This is heresy of the highest order, a direct challenge to the greater will's design and Marika's authority as its instrument. The conflict escalates into open warfare, a struggle that will be remembered as the War of the Black Flame, named for the dark fire wielded by the gloam-eyed queen's followers. The fingers, those gnarled emissaries of the greater will, emerged as the visible instruments of cosmic authority in the lands between. These two fingers, as they came to be known, manifested in sacred sanctuaries across the realm, each one serving as a living conduit between the divine outer force and the mortal world below. Their presence was not merely symbolic. The fingers possessed the ability to interpret the will of the greater will itself, translating incomprehensible cosmic intent into directives that Marika and her followers could understand and implement. Through these emissaries, Marika's claim to rule was reinforced with a legitimacy that transcended mere military conquest or political maneuvering. The fingers declared her the chosen vessel, the one true God of the new age, and their pronouncements carried the weight of divine mandate. Finger readers, those crones who had learned to interpret the subtle movements and gestures of the two fingers, spread throughout the land, establishing a network of religious authority that bound the realm together under a unified theological framework. The Elden Ring itself became the centerpiece of this new order, the physical manifestation of the laws that would govern reality under Marika's reign. This ring was not simply a symbol or artifact, but the very source code of existence in the lands between, a collection of great runes that each embodied fundamental aspects of the world's operation. Life and death, causality and fate, strength and frailty, all were encoded within the ring's structure. The Golden Order, as this system of cosmic law came to be called, derived its power directly from the Elden Ring's configuration. By controlling which runes were included and how they were arranged, Marika could literally rewrite the rules of reality. The most significant of these early alterations was the removal of the rune of death, which Marika entrusted to her shadow, Malekith, effectively granting immortality to those who lived under the Erdtree's grace. This single act transformed the lands between from a world where death was the natural conclusion of life into a realm where the blessed could live indefinitely, bound to the Erdtree's cycle of rebirth and return. To consolidate her rule and establish a dynasty that would endure through the ages, Marika took a consort, a warrior of unmatched prowess named Godfrey. This chieftain, who had once led a barbarian horde known as the Hornsent in brutal campaigns, was transformed by Marika's grace into something more refined, more civilized. She bestowed upon him the title of First Elden Lord, making him not merely her husband, but her partner in the administration of the Golden Order. Godfrey brought with him a martial strength that complemented Marika's divine authority. Where she provided the theological and cosmic legitimacy, he offered the military might necessary to enforce the new order's will. His beast regent, Sarosh, was grafted to his back, a living seal that tempered his savage bloodlust and allowed him to function as a lord of civilization rather than a warlord of chaos. Together, Marika and Godfrey represented the union of heaven and earth, divinity and mortality, order and strength. Their partnership would produce heirs who would shape the future of the lands between, including Godwin the Golden, who would become the embodiment of the Golden Order's ideals. As the Erdtree matured and its influence expanded, its roots began to spread with alarming vigor and depth. These were not ordinary roots. They burrowed through soil and stone alike, penetrating deep into the earth, reaching into caverns and catacombs that had existed long before the Erdtree's arrival. The roots seemed to seek something, to search for connections to the land's ancient spiritual networks. Wherever they spread, they brought change. The dead who had once rested peacefully in their graves found themselves caught in the Erdtree's cycle, their souls drawn upward to be reborn rather than allowed to pass into true death. The land's spiritual fabric, which had once operated according to older, more primal laws, was gradually overwritten by the Golden Order's new configuration. The physical landscape transformed as well. Golden leaves fell perpetually from the Erdtree's boughs, accumulating in drifts that never decayed. The light that emanated from the tree illuminated even distant corners of the realm, pushing back the darkness that had once held sway in certain regions. Yet not all the changes brought by the Erdtree's roots were entirely benign or easily understood. Strange phenomena began to be reported by those who ventured near the deepest root systems. Travelers spoke of shadows that moved independently of any light source, of whispers that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, of moments when the golden radiance would flicker and dim, revealing something darker beneath. These reports were sporadic at first, easily dismissed as the superstitions of the uneducated or the hallucinations of those who had spent too long in the depths. But they persisted, and they followed a pattern. The phenomena were always associated with the Erdtree's roots, particularly the oldest and deepest ones, those that had penetrated into regions where ancient powers still lingered. Some scholars of the early Golden Order began to theorize that the Erdtree, for all its divine majesty, cast a shadow, and that this shadow was not merely an absence of light, but a presence in its own right, a dark reflection of the golden tree above. Among those who took these reports most seriously were the Nox, an ancient civilization that had flourished in the lands between long before Marika's ascension. The Nox were astrologers and sorcerers of extraordinary skill, a people who had built their society around the study of the stars and the fundamental forces that governed the cosmos. They possessed knowledge that predated the Golden Order, wisdom drawn from observation of the night sky, and communion with cosmic entities that had nothing to do with the greater will. The Nox had their own theories about the nature of reality, their own understanding of how the world was structured, and these theories did not align well with the doctrines that Marika's fingers were promulgating. When the Nox examined the Erdtree and its spreading roots, they saw something that others missed or chose to ignore. They recognized that every source of light must cast a shadow, that every manifestation of order must have its counterpart in chaos, and they began to investigate the Erdtree's shadow with the same rigor they applied to their astronomical studies. Their findings were troubling, suggesting that the shadow was not merely a byproduct of the Erdtree's existence, but an integral part of its nature, perhaps even a necessary component of its function. The Golden Order could not tolerate such heretical inquiry. The Nox's insistence that the Erdtree had a shadow, that the Golden Order was incomplete or flawed in its understanding of cosmic law, represented a direct challenge to Marika's authority and the legitimacy of the entire system she had established. The Fingers declared the Nox's beliefs to be heresy of the highest order, and Marika responded with decisive action. The Nox were not merely suppressed or converted, they were exiled, driven from the surface world entirely, banished to the depths beneath the lands between. This was not a simple relocation. It was a cosmic punishment, enacted through the very laws of the Elden Ring itself. The Greater Will, acting through Marika and the Fingers, sent what the legends describe as a falling star, though whether this was a literal celestial object or some manifestation of divine wrath remains unclear. This cataclysm shattered the Nox's surface cities and drove the survivors deep underground, sealing them away from the Erdtree's light, condemning them to exist in perpetual darkness. In these lightless depths, the Nox established what would become known as the Eternal Cities, vast underground metropolises that preserved their civilization in exile. Nokron and Noxtella, these cities were called, and they represented a remarkable feat of engineering and sorcery. Built in caverns so deep that no natural light could reach them, the eternal cities were illuminated instead by artificial stars, great glowing orbs that the Nox created through their mastery of gravity sorcery and astrology. These false stars provided not just light, but a connection to the cosmos that the Nox had been denied when they were sealed away from the night sky. The architecture of the eternal cities reflected the Nox's sophisticated understanding of space and form, with buildings that seemed to defy conventional geometry, streets that curved in ways that suggested dimensions beyond the normal three, and plazas where gravity itself behaved strangely. Life in the eternal cities was a strange mixture of preservation and innovation. The Nox maintained their old customs and continued their astronomical studies as best they could, but they also adapted to their new circumstances, developing new forms of magic and technology suited to their subterranean existence. Driven by a mixture of pride, defiance, and genuine scientific curiosity, the Nox embarked on an ambitious project that would define their exile. If the surface world had its Erdtree, the Nox would create their own. They would grow a tree of silver rather than gold, a tree that would embody their understanding of cosmic law rather than the greater will's dictates. This was not merely an act of rebellion, though it was certainly that. It was also an attempt to prove that their theories were correct, that their knowledge was valid, that they could create something to rival or even surpass what Marika had established. The Nox poured their considerable expertise into this endeavor, combining their mastery of gravity magic with biological manipulation and cosmic attunement. They cultivated something that resembled a tree, though its nature was fundamentally different from the Erdtree above. Where the Erdtree was golden and radiant, the Nox's creation was silver and reflective. Where the Erdtree drew its power from the greater will, the Nox's tree was meant to channel forces they had observed in the stars themselves. The consequences of this attempt were catastrophic in ways the Nox could not have anticipated. Their artificial Erdtree did grow, but it grew wrong. It did not provide the blessings they had hoped for, but instead unleashed forces that even their advanced understanding could not control. The exact nature of the disaster that followed is obscured by time and the Nox's own reluctance to speak of it, but the evidence suggests that their creation tore at the fabric of reality in the underground realm, creating instabilities and anomalies that persist to this day. Some scholars believe that the Nox's failed Erdtree opened pathways to other realms or dimensions, allowing entities and influences to seep into the eternal cities that should have remained sealed away. Others theorize that the tree itself became corrupted, that in attempting to create light in the darkness, the Nox inadvertently gave form to something that embodied the shadow they had warned about. Among the many creations of the Nox, one stands out as particularly enigmatic and potentially connected to the Erdtree's shadow. The mimic tear, a being of liquid silver that could perfectly replicate any form it encountered, was rumored to be more than just a product of Nox ingenuity. Some whispered that the mimic tear was not created, but discovered, that it emerged from the failed Erdtree experiment, or was somehow drawn from the shadow realm itself. The substance from which mimic tears were formed had properties that defied easy explanation. It could copy not just physical form, but also skills, memories, and even the spiritual essence of whatever it mimicked. This suggested a connection to something fundamental, perhaps to the very nature of identity and existence itself. If the Erdtree's shadow was indeed a reflection or inversion of the golden tree, then the mimic tear, with its ability to create perfect reflections, might represent a fragment of that shadow made manifest. The burgeoning golden order, however, was not without its internal fissures. Marika's children, the demigods, were born, each inheriting fragments of the Elden Ring's power. These were beings of immense potential, their destinies intertwined with the fate of the lands between. Yet their individual ambitions and interpretations of the Golden Order would prove to be a source of future conflict. Among them, Radagon, Marika's second consort, emerged as a champion of the Golden Order, a figure of unwavering devotion and martial prowess. He led the Leyndell forces against the Carian royal family in the Lernian Wars, ultimately marrying Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, a union that brought a temporary peace and produced three more demigod children, Radan, Raykard, and Rani. His image was one of steadfast loyalty, a paragon of the Erdtree's divine light. Yet a profound secret lay at the heart of the Golden Order's very foundation. Radagon's dual nature, as both Marika and himself. This extraordinary truth, the very same being occupying two distinct forms, was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few, and perhaps not even fully understood by all who knew of it. This duality, a profound paradox, speaks volumes about the nature of the gods in the lands between, and perhaps even the very fabric of reality itself. It suggests a fluidity of identity, a merging of divine will that defies mortal comprehension. Though implications of this secret, had it become widely known, would have undoubtedly shattered the carefully constructed facade of the Golden Order, undermining its authority and the perceived stability of its divine lineage. The very notion of a single, unified divine will, so central to the Golden Order's ideology, would have been irrevocably compromised. This hidden truth, a ticking time bomb beneath the surface of their golden age, foreshadowed the instability to come. As the Golden Order solidified its dominion, whispers of ancient beliefs persisted. The Erdtree's shadow, a palpable presence, became inextricably linked to the concept of the other side in Nox theology. The Nox, an ancient civilization dwelling beneath the lands between, possessed a sophisticated understanding of cosmic forces and the boundaries between life and death, reality and illusion. For them, the other side was not merely a spiritual realm, but a tangible dimension, a mirror world, or an alternate plane of existence. The Erdtree's shadow, therefore, was not just an absence of light, but a liminal space, a gateway, or a reflection of this other side. This connection highlights the deep-seated fears and anxieties surrounding the unknown, and the way in which ancient beliefs often intersect with and interpret new, dominant ideologies. The Nox, with their advanced understanding of the stars and their unique perspective on the cosmos, viewed the Erdtree's influence with a degree of suspicion, recognizing the potential for imbalance and the suppression of other truths. Their understanding of the other side was not one of simple heaven or hell, but a complex tapestry of interconnected dimensions, and the Erdtree's shadow, for them, represented a palpable manifestation of this cosmic interplay. This underlying theological tension between the Golden Order's singular truth and the Nox's multifaceted cosmology would also contribute to the eventual fracturing of the lands between. Amidst the growing power of the Golden Order, a clandestine organization operated in the shadows, the Black Knife Assassins, tied to Marika herself. These shadowy figures, rumored to be Numen, Marika's own race, were her instruments of covert action, carrying out operations that required discretion and ruthlessness. Their existence underscores the darker side of Marika's rule, suggesting that even a divine ruler resorted to less than holy means to maintain control and achieve her objectives. The Black Knives were not mere thugs. They were highly skilled, agile, and possessed a unique ability to inflict wounds that prevented the Erdtree's blessing of rebirth, a chilling power that would soon be unleashed with devastating consequences. Their connection to Marika is crucial, implying that their actions, however brutal, were ultimately sanctioned by the very queen who championed the Golden Order. This paradox of a divine ruler employing assassins hints at the complex and often contradictory nature of power in the lands between. It suggests that even the gods were not above political maneuvering and the elimination of rivals, and that the Golden Order, despite its outward appearance of benevolence, harbored a darker, more pragmatic undercurrent. The simmering tensions and hidden agendas finally erupted in a cataclysmic event, the Night of the Black Knives. Under the cloak of a moonless night, the Black Knife assassins, wielding their specialized blades, struck simultaneously across the lands between. Their primary target was Godwyn the Golden, Marika's firstborn son, a beloved and revered demigod. Godwyn's death, however, was not a simple assassination. The Black Knives, empowered by a fragment of the Rune of Death, inflicted a unique wound that killed Godwyn's soul while leaving his body intact. This unprecedented act, a violation of the very essence of life and death as understood by the Golden Order, sent shockwaves through the lands between. The exact motivations behind this horrific act remain shrouded in mystery, though theories abound. Some believe it was a desperate attempt by Marika to remove the Rune of Death from the Elden Ring, or perhaps a more sinister plot to destabilize the existing order. Regardless of the intent, the consequences were immediate and profound. Godwyn's death created a rift in the Golden Order, a wound that would never truly heal. The divine lineage was broken, and the very concept of immortality, once a cornerstone of the Golden Order's promise, was irrevocably shattered. The demigods, once united under Marika's benevolent rule, were now consumed by grief, suspicion, and a thirst for vengeance. The stability of the lands between, once seemingly unshakable, began to crumble. The death of such a prominent and beloved figure, in such a brutal and inexplicable manner, sowed seeds of doubt and fear among the populace, undermining their faith in the divine order that governed their lives. The Golden Order, once a beacon of hope and stability, was now perceived as vulnerable, its power no longer absolute. The very foundations upon which it was built began to crack, revealing the fragility of even divine authority when faced with such an unprecedented act of violence. This event marked a critical turning point, irrevocably altering the trajectory of the lands between and setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to its ultimate downfall. In the wake of Godwyn's demise, the Erdtree's shadow, once a mere atmospheric phenomenon, became a focal point of fear and intrigue among the demigods. It was no longer just a shadow, but a symbol of the unknown, a harbinger of ill omen, and a constant reminder of the fragility of life and the ever-present threat of darkness. The demigods, each with their own ambitions and interpretations of the Golden Order, began to view the shadow with a mixture of dread and fascination. Some saw it as a manifestation of the encroaching chaos, a physical representation of the unraveling of their world. Others, perhaps more cunning, saw it as an opportunity, a power to be harnessed or exploited in their quest for dominance. The shadow, therefore, transformed from a passive element of the landscape into an active player in the unfolding drama, a silent witness to the escalating conflicts and a potent symbol of the deep-seated anxieties that now plagued the demigods. Its presence loomed large, a constant reminder of the dark forces at play and the precarious balance that once held the lands between together. The culmination of these escalating tensions, betrayals, and the profound destabilization caused by Godwyn's death was the beginning of the shattering war. The demigods, fueled by grief ambition, and a desperate struggle for power turned upon each other. The Elden Ring, the very source of their power, was shattered into great runes, each claimed by a warring demigod. This cataclysmic conflict fractured the Golden Order, plunging the lands between into an era of unprecedented chaos and devastation. The once unified realm became a battlefield, its landscapes scarred by endless conflict, its people suffering under the tyranny of warring factions. The dream of a golden age, ushered in by Marika and the Erdtree, lay in ruins, replaced by a nightmare of endless war and despair. The shattering was not merely a war, it was the unraveling of a civilization, the collapse of a divine order, and the descent into an age of darkness that would forever alter the fate of the lands between. The Erdtree, once a symbol of life and prosperity, now cast a long, ominous shadow over a broken world, a silent testament to the tragic consequences of ambition, betrayal, and the inherent fragility of even divine power. The age of gods gave way to an age of shattered fragments, each vying for supremacy in a land consumed by the echoes of a broken past. Our journey through the shadow-drenched annals of the lands between now brings us to a pivotal, cataclysmic event, the Night of the Black Knives, which ushers in the very beginning of the Shattering Era. This period, marked by unprecedented violence and the sundering of a once unified realm, is directly precipitated by the death of Queen Marika the Eternal. Her demise, shrouded in mystery and consequence, shatters the Golden Order, the foundational religious and political structure she established, and plunges the lands between into an age of unparalleled chaos and conflict. It is a time when the established order collapses, leaving a power vacuum and a world forever altered by the machinations of ambitious demigods and ancient forgotten powers. Central to this unfolding tragedy is Rani the Witch, an Empyrean, a being chosen by the greater will to potentially succeed Marika as a god. Rani, the daughter of Radagon, Marika's second consort, and Renala, queen of the full moon, harbors a deep-seated resentment towards her predetermined fate. She views her Empyrean status not as a divine blessing, but as a gilded cage, a puppet on the strings of the greater will, the enigmatic outer deity that governs the Elden Ring, and by extension, the lands between. Driven by a fierce desire for self-determination and an ambition to forge a new destiny, Rani begins to secretly plot to overthrow this cosmic puppeteer and free herself from the shackles of her Empyrean destiny. Her rebellion is not merely against the Golden Order, but against the very cosmic forces that dictate existence. To achieve her audacious goal, Rani undertakes a perilous endeavor, the forging of the Black Knives. These are no ordinary weapons, for they are imbued with a fragment of the Rune of Death, a primordial aspect of the Elden Ring that governs mortality and true death. This potent, forbidden power is not easily acquired. Rani, through means yet unknown, but undoubtedly involving cunning and stealth, manages to steal a portion of this rune from Malekith the Black Blade, Marika's shadow-bound beast and the keeper of destined death. Malekith, in his role as the Glomide Queen's vanquisher and the Rune of Death's jailer, was entrusted by Marika to seal away this dangerous power, preventing true death from returning to the lands between. The theft of even a sliver of this rune is an act of profound sacrilege and immense power, signifying Rani's willingness to transgress the most fundamental laws of the Golden Order. The Black Knives, thus empowered, become instruments of true death, capable of severing the very soul from the body, a power previously absent from the lands between. With these deadly instruments forged, Rani requires agents to wield them. She recruits, or perhaps more accurately, coerces the Black Knife assassins into her service. These assassins are a mysterious group of Numen women, an ancient race known for their longevity and their distinctive silver skinned appearance. Intriguingly, these Newman women have historical ties to Queen Marika herself. This connection suggests a deeper, more complex web of allegiances and betrayals than initially apparent. Were these assassins once loyal to Marika, now turned against her Golden Order by Rani's persuasive power or some forgotten grievance? Their Newman heritage also hints at a connection to an older, pre Golden Order past, perhaps making them more susceptible to Rani's anti Greater Will agenda. Their expertise in stealth and assassination, combined with their racial ties, makes them uniquely suited for the dark task Rani envisions. Rani's plot is not merely an act of brute force, it is strategically brilliant, exploiting a fundamental vulnerability. She discovers a pre existing weakness in the Erdtree's shadow, a vulnerability that she can exploit to ensure the success of her assassins. This weakness is not explicitly detailed in historical records, but it is speculated to be linked to the Erdtree's gradual separation from the full influence of the Greater Will, or perhaps even to Marika's own burgeoning defiance of the outer god. The Erdtree, the colossal, golden tree that dominates the lands between and is the physical manifestation of the Elden Ring's power, casts a metaphorical and literal shadow over the entire realm. Any weakness in this shadow would imply a weakening of the Greater Will's direct influence, creating an opening for Rani's forbidden magic. This suggests a long-standing, perhaps even ancient flaw that Rani, with her keen intellect and access to forbidden knowledge, manages to uncover and weaponize. Further evidence of Rani's sophisticated planning lies in the nature of the weapons themselves. The assassin's blades beyond the stolen rune of death are imbued with traces of shadow magic. This magic is distinctly different from the Golden Order's incantations, which rely on the power of the Erdtree and the Greater Will. The presence of shadow magic suggests an outside influence, perhaps even hinting at Rani's own studies into forbidden arts or her connections to entities beyond the Golden Order's purview. This dual nature of the Black Knives, wielding both the stolen rune of death and an alien shadow magic, makes them exceptionally potent and difficult to counter, capable of bypassing the established defenses of the Golden Order. For her grand design, Rani requires a symbolic target, one whose death would send shockwaves throughout the lands between and irrevocably alter the course of history. She chooses Godwyn the Golden, Marika's beloved son, and a revered champion of the Golden Order, as the primary target. Godwyn is not merely a demigod, he is the epitome of the Golden Order's ideals, a figure of immense popularity and hope. His death would be a profound blow, not just to Marika, but to the very spirit of the Golden Order. His symbolic importance makes him the perfect, devastating target for Rani's agenda, guaranteeing that his demise would be a catalyst for widespread upheaval. With all pieces in place, Rani orchestrates the Night of Black Knives, a meticulously planned, coordinated assassination targeting multiple demigods simultaneously. While Godwyn is the most prominent victim, the plural demigods suggest that Rani's plot was far more extensive than a single assassination, aiming to destabilize the entire ruling class of the lands between in one fell swoop. This demonstrates the scale of her ambition and the ruthlessness of her methods. The simultaneous nature of these attacks would prevent a unified response and maximize the shock and chaos, further ensuring the collapse of the Golden Order. On the fateful night of Black Knives, under the cloak of deepest darkness, the Black Knife assassins infiltrate Lendel, the royal capital, and other key locations throughout the lands between. Their stealth and the element of surprise, combined with the potent magic of their blades, allow them to bypass the formidable defenses of the Golden Order. The capital, a bastion of the Golden Order's power, becomes a scene of unimaginable horror as the assassins move through its hallowed halls, their silver blades glinting in the moonlight. The climax of this night of terror is the assassination of Godwyn the Golden. He is slain in his chambers by the Black Knife assassins. However, the unique power of the stolen rune of death on their blades has an unprecedented effect. While Godwin's soul is utterly destroyed, his body remains alive, albeit in a grotesque, corrupted state. This agonizing, half dead existence is a horrifying testament to the power of destined death, now unleashed upon the lands between. This paradoxical death, where the soul perishes but the flesh endures, creates the very first death root, a blighted, corrupting growth that spreads across the land, a physical manifestation of Godwin's unnatural demise. This event, the death of Godwin's soul, but not his body, is the true beginning of the shattering era, a wound that will never truly heal, and a mystery that will haunt the lands between for ages to come. Her spirit, now free from the confines of her Empyrean flesh, continued to exist within the body of a discarded doll. This act of self-mutilation, a ritual of immense power and dark magic, was not merely an escape, but a calculated move to sever her ties to the Golden Order and its dictates. By shedding her physical form, Rani rendered herself untouchable by the greater will, the outer god that had chosen her as an Empyrean, a being destined to become a god. Her spirit, now anchored to the doll, retained its consciousness and magical prowess, allowing her to orchestrate events from the shadows, a puppet master pulling strings unseen. The brutal efficiency of the Black Knives, however, was not limited to a single target. While Rani's ritual was a success, other demigods, children of Marika and Radagon, were also marked for death. Morgoth, the Omen King, and his brother Mog, Lord of Blood, were among those targeted. Yet fate, or perhaps a different kind of divine intervention, spared them. Hidden away beneath the capital city of Lindell, within the labyrinthine depths of the subterranean shunning grounds, they survived the onslaught. This subterranean prison, a place of exile for those born as omens, monstrous beings rejected by the Golden Order, inadvertently became their sanctuary. The Black Knives, for all their dark magic and stealth, could not penetrate every hidden corner of the lands between. Their failure to eliminate all demigods would have profound consequences, allowing these powerful figures to emerge later as formidable adversaries in the ensuing shattering. The aftermath of the night was a macabre canvas of violence and mystery. At each crime scene, a chilling signature lingered, the faint, ethereal residue of shadow magic. This arcane energy, a hallmark of the Black Knife assassins, baffled the Golden Order investigators. Their diviners and scholars, steeped in the principles of the Erdtree's grace, struggled to comprehend these alien energies. The Golden Order, for all its dominance, was not omniscient, and this new form of magic, so antithetical to its own, presented an insurmountable puzzle. The lingering shadows, like spectral fingerprints, hinted at a power beyond their understanding, sowing seeds of doubt and fear within the very heart of the established order. Adding to the pervasive unease, the colossal Erdtree itself, the very symbol of the Golden Order's dominion, behaved unusually during the night of the Black Knives. Its golden glow, usually a steadfast beacon, flickered and dimmed in sporadic, unsettling ways. Some reported seeing fleeting darker shadows within its radiant canopy, as if the sacred tree itself were recoiling from the horrific events unfolding beneath it. While these observations were widespread, the Erdtree's direct involvement in the night's events, or its precise reaction, was never definitively confirmed. Was it a passive witness, its light momentarily dimmed by the sheer magnitude of the sacrilege? Or did its unusual behavior signal a deeper, more profound disturbance within the very fabric of the lands between, a cosmic tremor echoing the spiritual imbalance about to be unleashed? The mystery of the Erdtree's flickering light remains an enduring enigma of that fateful night. Meanwhile, Far from the chaos of the assassinations, Malekith, the Black Blade, guardian of the Rune of Death, sensed the unthinkable. A sliver of the rune, a fragment of the very concept of mortality, had been stolen. Malekith, a loyal shadow and half-brother to Queen Marika, was bound by an ancient oath to contain the rune of death, preventing its power from running rampant across the lands between. His senses, keen and attuned to the very essence of death, would have flared with alarm as the stolen fragment was wielded. Yet despite his immense power and unwavering vigilance, he arrived too late. The assassinations had already occurred, the damage irreversible. The theft of the Rune of Death, a forbidden act, was a betrayal of cosmic proportions, and its unauthorized use unleashed a torrent of consequences that would forever scar the lands between. Malekith's failure, however understandable given the clandestine nature of the theft, would haunt him, leading to his self-imposed imprisonment and his relentless pursuit of those who dared to wield the forbidden power. The death of Godwyn the Golden, the first demigod to perish, was not merely a political assassination. It was a spiritual cataclysm. His soul, instead of returning to the Erdtree as was customary for the blessed, was tainted by the stolen rune of death. This unprecedented event created a spiritual imbalance of monumental proportions, a tear in the very fabric of life and death. From this profound disruption emerged those who live in death, spectral beings, neither truly alive nor truly dead, their bodies animated by a corrupted form of vitality. These grotesque entities, often appearing as skeletal figures or bloated corpses, began to rise across the lands between, haunting catacombs, graveyards, and forgotten places. Their emergence was a direct consequence of Godwyn's unnatural demise, a testament to the profound violation of the natural order. Their presence served as a constant, horrifying reminder of the Night of the Black Knives and the catastrophic consequences of meddling with the Rune of Death. The Golden Order, which preached eternal life and the return to the Erdtree, had no answer for these abominations, further eroding its authority and sowing widespread fear. Queen Marika the Eternal, the very deity of the Golden Order, was utterly shattered by the death of her beloved son, Godwyn. Her grief, a tempest of despair and fury, transcended mortal emotion. It was a grief that shook the foundations of the world. In an act of profound defiance and unbearable sorrow, Marika, with her own divine strength, smashed the Elden Ring. This act, the shattering of the very source of the lands between's order and prosperity, was not a mere outburst. It was a deliberate, cataclysmic act of rebellion against the greater will. The Elden Ring, a physical manifestation of the Golden Order's laws and the greater will's influence, was the very bedrock of their civilization. By destroying it, Marika not only expressed her profound anguish, but also sought to break free from the oppressive control of the outer god that had dictated her destiny. This singular, monumental act accelerated the inevitable, plunging the lands between into an era of unprecedented chaos and war, forever known as the Shattering. Her actions, born of grief, would paradoxically set in motion the very events that would lead to the rise of the Tarnished and the potential for a new age. In the wake of Marika's defiant act, the greater will, the cosmic entity that had guided and empowered the Golden Order, abandoned its demigod progeny. The shattering of the Elden Ring was an unforgivable affront, a direct challenge to its authority. With the greater will's grace withdrawn, the demigods, now bereft of their primary source of divine power and guidance, turned on each other. The vast, interconnected world of the lands between, once united under the Golden Order, fractured into warring factions. Each demigod, driven by ambition, madness, or a desperate desire for power, sought to gather the scattered fragments of the Elden Ring, known as Great Runes, for themselves. This desperate struggle for power and control ignited the Shattering War, a brutal and protracted conflict that laid waste to the once prosperous lands. Castles crumbled, cities burned, and countless lives were lost in the relentless pursuit of these divine shards. The once proud demigods, now reduced to squabbling warlords, tore their world apart, a testament to the destructive power of unchecked ambition and the absence of a unifying divine authority. Throughout this spiraling descent into chaos, Rani's involvement in the Night of the Black Knives, while widely suspected, was never definitively proven. Her meticulous planning and the clandestine nature of her ritual ensured that no direct evidence linked her to the assassinations. She manipulated events from the shadows, a master strategist whose true motives remained veiled. While the Golden Order's investigators undoubtedly harbored suspicions, the sheer scale of the ensuing chaos and the lack of concrete proof allowed her to operate with relative impunity. Her ability to orchestrate such a profound event while remaining hidden speaks volumes about her cunning and the depth of her magical prowess. She was a ghost in the machine, a silent architect of ruin, and her ultimate goals remained shrouded in mystery, even as the lands between tore itself asunder. Following the Night of the Black Knives, the assassins themselves scattered. Their mission, in their eyes, was complete. Some, like the members of the Black Knife ringleader Electo's faction, were relentlessly hunted by Malekith, the Black Blade, who sought to reclaim the stolen rune of death and exact vengeance for its misuse. These assassins, now fugitives, were pursued across the desolate landscapes, their numbers dwindling as Malekith's wrath caught up to them. Others, however, faded into the shadows, going into hiding in remote corners of the lands between, their identities and allegiances becoming even more obscure. Some may have found new patrons, lending their deadly skills to other factions in the ensuing Shattering War, while others simply vanished, becoming legends whispered in hushed tones. The Black Knife assassins, once a unified force, became fragmented, their legacy a mixture of fear, mystery, and a dark, enduring impact on the history of the lands between. Their actions had irrevocably altered the course of history, setting in motion a chain of events that would lead to the arrival of the Tarnished and the potential for a new age. The aftermath of the Night of the Black Knives left a deep, festering wound, not just in the Golden Order's psyche, but in the very fabric of reality. Scholars, in their attempts to understand the unprecedented assassination of a demigod, painstakingly gathered fragments of the assassin's shadow magic. These lingering traces, infused with the very essence of the Black Knives, were subjected to intense scrutiny. What they discovered was profoundly unsettling. The magic employed by the assassins bore no resemblance to any known Golden Order incantations or sorceries. It was alien, distinct from the faith-based miracles of the Erdtree or the celestial glintstone arts of Raya Lucarian sorcerers. This finding sparked a quiet panic among the intellectual elite, hinting at an influence beyond their comprehension, a force that operated entirely outside their established cosmic order. Years later, a diligent Tarnished sorcerer named Rogier, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a keen intellect, would independently stumble upon these same enigmatic traces. His investigations into the death of Godwyn the Golden led him down a dark path, one that ultimately pointed towards Rani the Witch. Rogier, through his meticulous research and arcane observations, began to suspect Rani's involvement, recognizing the unique death-blight-infused nature of the magic used. However, his pursuit of this forbidden truth came at a terrible cost. For daring to delve into such dangerous secrets, Rogier was afflicted with a devastating curse, a creeping death blight that slowly consumed his body, rendering him a tragic testament to the perils of uncovering uncomfortable truths within the lands between. His fate served as a chilling warning to any who might dare to pry too deeply into the night of the Black Knives. The true mastermind behind the shadow magic's unique properties, the source of its terrifying efficacy, remained shrouded in mystery. While Rogier suspected Ronnie's hand in orchestrating the event, the origin of the distinct un-Golden Order nature of the death magic itself was a separate, more profound enigma. Some whispered of the two fingers, the silent conduits of the greater will, suggesting a darker, more manipulative aspect to their influence than previously understood. Others, more daring in their speculation, dared to utter the names of outer gods, primordial entities from beyond the known cosmos, whose motivations and powers dwarfed even those of the greater will. The very idea that such a foreign, destructive force could be wielded within the lands between sent shivers down the spines of even the most devout Golden Order followers, challenging their foundational beliefs about the world's natural order. The Night of the Black Knives inflicted a spiritual wound upon the Erdtree itself, a sacred scar that would never truly heal. This wasn't merely a symbolic injury. The very essence of the Erdtree, its lifeblood and spiritual energy, was tainted by the act of deicide. The death of Godwyn, a direct descendant of Queen Marika and a beloved demigod, created a profound imbalance, a spiritual dissonance that resonated through the roots and branches of the colossal tree. This wound manifested as a lingering corruption, a subtle decay that slowly but inexorably spread, weakening the Erdtree's divine presence and contributing to the overall spiritual malaise that would grip the lands between. In a desperate attempt to contain the spiritual contagion and preserve some semblance of reverence, Godwyn's corrupted body was interred at the very roots of the Erdtree. This act, intended to honor him and perhaps even allow his essence to return to the Erdtree's embrace, had unforeseen and horrific consequences. Instead of finding peace, Godwyn's body became a conduit for the death blight, a grotesque seed from which a new, terrifying entity would emerge. Buried deep within the sacred ground, his flesh, infused with the stolen rune of death, began to fester and mutate, giving rise to the Prince of Death. This abomination, a twisted mockery of life and death, would spread its influence through the catacombs and crypts beneath the lands between, creating an army of undead and further corrupting the very concept of life and death within the Golden Order's dominion. The Prince of Death's existence was a constant, horrifying reminder of the Night of the Black Knives, a living monument to the failure of the Golden Order to truly contain the forces unleashed that fateful night. In the immediate aftermath of the Night of the Black Knives, the Erdtree's shadow, that vast, encompassing presence cast over the lands between, began to behave erratically. It shimmered with unnatural hues, pulsed with an unsettling energy, and at times seemed to writhe with an unseen agony. This wasn't merely a trick of the light or a figment of paranoid imaginations. The very essence of the Erdtree, its spiritual integrity, had been compromised. The lingering corruption from Godwyn's death and the stolen rune of death manifested in these visible, unsettling ways, a constant, silent testament to the profound spiritual trauma inflicted upon the world. The erratic behavior of the shadow served as a palpable, atmospheric indicator of the deep-seated malaise that had begun to grip the lands between, a precursor to the greater calamities that were soon to unfold. Meanwhile, Ronnie's spirit, now liberated from her physical form, fled to the serene, mystical region of Liurnia of the Lakes. Here, amidst the shimmering waters and ancient ruins, she continued her clandestine plot to overthrow the Golden Order. Her goal was nothing less than to usher in an age of stars, a new cosmic order free from the influence of the greater will and its two fingers. From her hidden sanctuary, the Moonlight Altar, Ronnie meticulously orchestrated her next moves, gathering allies, manipulating events, and patiently waiting for the opportune moment to execute her grand design. Her spiritual form, while granting her freedom from mortal constraints, also made her elusive, a ghost in the machine, making her an even more formidable and unpredictable force in the unfolding drama of the lands between. The Knight of the Black Knives, by irrevocably shattering the Elden Ring and plunging the lands between into chaos, directly escalated the nascent tensions into a full blown conflict known as the Shattering War. The demigods, children of Marika and Godfrey, once bound by a fragile peace, now turned on each other with unbridled fury. Each sought to claim the shattered pieces of the Elden Ring, believing themselves the rightful inheritors of its power and the future rulers of the lands between. Mighty figures like Radon, the Star Scourge, a colossal warrior who held the very stars in place, clashed with Millennia, Blade of Miquella, the undefeated goddess of Rot, in epic battles that scarred the very landscape. Their conflicts, and those of their siblings, tore the lands between asunder, transforming once prosperous regions into desolate battlegrounds. The ambition, pride, and grief of these demigods fueled a war of unprecedented scale and devastation, a direct and tragic consequence of the Night of the Black Knives. In a desperate attempt to maintain control and suppress the truth, the Night of the Black Knives became a forbidden topic within the walls of Leyndell, the royal capital. The remaining Golden Order loyalists, those who still clung to the crumbling ideals of Marika's reign, actively suppressed any mention or investigation into the event. They understood that the full truth of Godwin's death and the implication of Ranni's involvement would irrevocably shatter the faith of the populace and further destabilize their already precarious hold on power. The official narrative was carefully crafted to obscure the truth, to paint a picture of an inexplicable tragedy rather than a meticulously planned act of defiance against the greater will. This deliberate suppression of truth created a deep-seated paranoia within Leyndell, fostering an atmosphere of suspicion and fear, where even whispering about the Night of the Black Knives could invite severe repercussions. The Golden Order, once a beacon of truth and stability, had become a propagator of lies, a tragic reflection of its own internal decay. Our journey through the lands between's most enigmatic history now brings us to a period of profound cosmic anomaly and escalating dread, the late Erdtree era, a time of decline that saw the Golden Order begin to fray at its very seams. Following the cataclysmic Night of the Black Knives, an event that irrevocably altered the course of fate, a new and unsettling phenomenon gripped the lands between. We are now in the era of the hidden eclipse, a mystery that even today defies complete understanding. It was during this twilight of the Erdtree's golden age that the ancient astrologers of the mountaintops of the giants, those venerable scholars who meticulously charted the celestial dance, recorded an event that sent shivers through their stargazing observatories. They spoke of an eclipse that cast no shadow, a paradoxical occurrence that defied the very laws of their cosmic understanding. This was no ordinary obscuration of the sun, for while the light dimmed, no corresponding shadow stretched across the landscape, an unnatural property that marked it as something entirely alien to their established astronomical models. This celestial aberration was observed with chilling proximity to the colossal Erdtree itself, its golden boughs seemingly bathed in this shadowless twilight, a stark contrast to the usual radiant glow that defined the very heart of the Golden Order. The astrologers, whose lives were dedicated to interpreting the cosmos, found themselves confronted with a phenomenon that shattered their understanding, a silent harbinger of deeper unseen forces at play. Almost immediately, and unsettlingly coincident with the onset of this shadowless eclipse, a wave of disappearances swept through the ranks of the Finger Maidens, those dedicated servants tasked with guiding the tarnished and tending to the two fingers. Multiple maidens vanished without a trace, their fates shrouded in an impenetrable mystery. Were they taken by some unseen force, drawn to the eclipse? Did they willingly abandon their sacred duties, perhaps swayed by the unsettling cosmic event? The scant records that remain offer no definitive answers, only a chilling silence where their presence once was. Their absence left a void, not just in the practical guidance they offered, but in the spiritual fabric of the lands between, hinting at a disruption far more profound than mere abduction. As the shadowless light persisted, a chilling whisper began to circulate among the servants of the two fingers, those towering sentient digits that serve as conduits for the greater will. Rumors spoke of a shadowless light that was not only unnatural, but actively corrupting the very guidance of grace, the divine blessing that guides the tarnished. This wasn't merely a lack of light, but a perversion of it, suggesting a malevolent influence at work. The guidance of grace, once a clear and unwavering beacon, was now reportedly flickering, distorted, or even leading individuals astray. This internal discord within the very mechanism of divine guidance suggested a deep seated spiritual sickness, an affliction that threatened the fundamental tenets of the Golden Order. In the desolate expanse of the consecrated snowfield, a region perpetually blanketed in pristine white, a new and unsettling religious movement began to coalesce. A sect of eclipse apostles emerged, their devotion centered around this inexplicable celestial phenomenon. They didn't fear the shadowless eclipse. Instead, they worshipped it as a deathless sun, believing it to be a manifestation of a new eternal power, one that transcended the cycles of life and death as understood by the Golden Order. Their beliefs, steeped in the imagery of endless twilight and the absence of conventional shadows, offered a stark counterpoint to the prevailing faith, hinting at a desire to escape the inherent mortality ingrained in the Erdtree's cycle. It was during this tumultuous era that the infamous Eclipse Shotel was forged. This curved sword, imbued with an eerie power, bears runes upon its blade that strongly suggest a deliberate manipulation of the Erdtree's shadow itself. The very concept of a weapon designed to interact with, or even command, the Erdtree's shadow speaks to a profound understanding of its mystical properties, and perhaps a desire to harness its power for purposes antithetical to the Golden Order. The Shotel's existence is a tangible testament to the era's fascination with and attempts to control the shadowless eclipse, hinting at a darker, more pragmatic approach to this cosmic anomaly than mere worship. The unsettling implications of the eclipse also led to a significant schism among the finger readers, those enigmatic crones who interpret the pronouncements of the two fingers. While some maintained their unwavering faith in the greater will, others, deeply disturbed by the eclipse and its associated phenomena, began to voice a radical new interpretation. They claimed that the eclipse was not merely an omen, but a herald of the Erdtree's true death, a spiritual demise far more profound than any physical decay. This faction believed that the shadowless light signified a fundamental shift in the cosmic order, one that would irrevocably sever the lands between from the greater will, leading to an entirely new era of existence, perhaps one devoid of grace altogether. This ideological split within the very interpreters of divine will underscored the deep uncertainty and fear that the hidden eclipse had instilled. Even Miquella, the Empyrean of the Erdtree, a figure known for his relentless pursuit of a cure for his sister, Millennia's scarlet rot, and his own eternal childhood, showed a keen interest in the shadowless eclipse. Records within the archives of his meticulously crafted Erdtree reveal his scholarly investigations into the phenomenon. It is speculated that Miquella, in his desperate attempts to circumvent destined death, the inherent mortality woven into the fabric of the lands between, saw in the shadowless eclipse a potential pathway to achieve his goals. Perhaps he believed its unnatural properties, its defiance of conventional light and shadow, held the key to a new form of immortality, one that could transcend the limitations imposed by the Erdtree and the greater will. His intellectual curiosity, coupled with his ultimate ambition, suggests a profound connection between the eclipse and his own enigmatic quest for a perfect, unblighted existence. Adding another layer of intrigue to this already complex tapestry of events, the elusive Black Knife assassins, those shadowy figures responsible for the Night of the Black Knives, were sighted near Lendell, the royal capital, during the period of the eclipse. Their presence so close to the heart of the Golden Order during such a significant cosmic event raised immediate questions about their motives. Were they observing the eclipse, perhaps seeking to understand its power? Were they involved in the disappearances of the Finger Maidens? Or were they merely capitalizing on the prevailing chaos and confusion to further their own inscrutable agenda? Their silent, menacing presence during this time suggests a deeper, perhaps conspiratorial, connection to the shadowless light, their motives remaining as veiled as their identities. Beneath the boughs of a minor Erdtree, within the crumbling walls of a forgotten church, a hidden mural was discovered depicting the shadowless eclipse in stark and unsettling detail. What makes this mural particularly significant is its juxtaposition of the eclipse alongside ancient eclipsed sun symbols, symbols long associated with the deathbirds. These spectral creatures, harbingers of death and guardians of ancient burial rites, predate the Golden Order and represent a primordial form of death, distinct from the destined death governed by the Erdtree. The mural's imagery suggests a profound, perhaps even causal, link between the shadowless eclipse and these ancient death rituals, hinting at a resurgence of forgotten powers and practices. Further reinforcing this connection to archaic death rites, the lore inscribed upon the Twinbird kite shield speaks volumes. This shield, bearing the image of two intertwined birds, one living and one dead, explicitly hints that the shadowless eclipse revived ancient death rites that significantly predated the establishment of the Erdtree and the Golden Order. These were not the rites of destined death, but older, more primal forms of passing, perhaps connected to the very concept of death itself before Marika's ascendancy. The eclipse, therefore, appears to have acted as a catalyst, awakening dormant forces and forgotten traditions, threatening to unravel the very fabric of life and death as defined by the Golden Order. This confluence of ancient death, cosmic anomaly, and the decline of the Erdtree sets the stage for even more profound upheavals, as we will explore further in the next segment of The Hidden Eclipse. The whispers of temporal distortion continue to ripple through the lands between. In the frigid, desolate expanse of the mountaintops of the giants, spectral figures, the lingering echoes of those who perished in the ancient conflicts, spoke of an impossible celestial event, the sun swallowing its own shadow. This cryptic phrase, uttered by souls trapped in a temporal eddy, hinted at a profound disruption, not merely of light and dark, but of the very fabric of time and causality. It suggested a moment when the natural order, the predictable dance of celestial bodies, was violently inverted, perhaps even consumed. What force could command such an inversion, and what could be its ultimate purpose? The very notion defied every established understanding of the Golden Order and its cosmic principles. This was not merely an eclipse, but an act of cosmic self-cannibalism, a reversal of fundamental laws that would leave an indelible scar on reality itself. Further evidence of this unsettling phenomenon materialized in a grim discovery near Castle Sol, a fortress steeped in the worship of the setting sun and the elusive promise of an eclipse. There, a lone finger maiden, one of the sacred women chosen by the two fingers to guide Tarnished, was found lifeless. Her eyes, usually clear conduits for divine guidance, were not merely dead, but burned, seared by an inexplicable lightless flame. This was no ordinary fire, no mundane conflagration. It was a flame that consumed not with heat, but with an absence, a void that devoured light itself. The implication was chilling. The very source of her spiritual connection, her ability to perceive the guidance of the greater will, had been extinguished by a phenomenon antithetical to all life and divine presence. Her death was not just a tragedy, but a profound omen, a testament to a power that could corrupt even the most sacred of beings. Within the ancient, crumbling archives of Castle Sol, amidst scrolls detailing astronomical observations and forgotten rituals, records were unearthed detailing Lord Miquella's desperate quest. These documents revealed that the Empyrean, driven by his unwavering devotion to his cursed twin sister Millennia and his desire to cure her scarlet rot, had commissioned what was cryptically termed eclipse medicine. This potent concoction, Miquella believed, held the key to reviving the soulless, those whose spirits had been severed from their bodies, or perhaps those who lingered in a state akin to undeath, like Godwyn the Golden. Miquella's ambition was not merely to heal, but to transcend the very boundaries of life and death, to restore what the Erdtree and the Golden Order had seemingly deemed irrevocably lost. His pursuit of eclipse medicine suggested a radical departure from established Golden Order principles, hinting at a willingness to embrace forbidden knowledge or power to achieve his noble, yet ultimately transgressive goals. From this same period, a potent symbol of this emerging cosmic dread emerged, the Eclipse Crest Great Shield. This formidable shield, crafted with meticulous detail, bore a striking and disturbing motif. It depicted a sun, not merely obscured, but hollowed out, its radiant core replaced by the stark, silhouetted form of the Erdtree itself. This imagery was a profound inversion of the natural order. The Erdtree, the source of all life and grace, was shown not as a giver of light, but as a devourer, casting a shadow so absolute it consumed the very sun. It was a visual prophecy, a chilling premonition of a world where the Erdtree's influence had become so pervasive, so absolute, that it eclipsed even the most fundamental celestial body, leaving behind only a void. The shield served as a stark warning, a testament to the growing unease surrounding the Erdtree's true nature and the potential for its boundless influence to become a suffocating darkness. As the anomalies mounted, the Golden Order, ever vigilant in maintaining its dominion, dispatched a specialized contingent of confessors. These agents, trained in both spiritual doctrine and martial prowess, were tasked with investigating the increasingly disturbing reports emanating from the northern reaches. Their mission was to ascertain the nature of these strange occurrences, particularly the rumors of temporal distortions and the ominous celestial phenomena. However, this investigative party vanished without a trace near the treacherous, snow-choked expanse of the Forbidden Lands, the gateway to the mountaintops of the Giants. Their disappearance was not merely a loss of personnel, it was a symbolic failure of the Golden Order's ability to comprehend, let alone control, the forces at play. It suggested that whatever was unfolding in the shadow of the Erdtree was beyond the purview of their established dogma and their most skilled agents, hinting at a power that could simply erase those who sought to understand it. Concurrently, an unsettling shift was observed in the behavior of the walking mausoleums, those colossal mobile sepulchres that housed the soulless demigods. These monolithic structures, usually traversing the landscape with ponderous, rhythmic steps, began to exhibit unusual activity. Their massive bells, typically silent unless disturbed by powerful winds or specific rituals, began to toll spontaneously, echoing across the land without any discernible external force. The mournful, resonant peals were not the usual tolling of a funeral dirge. They were irregular, discordant, almost frantic. This unbidden chorus suggested a profound agitation within the mausoleums themselves, as if the soulless demigods within were reacting to an unseen, unheard disturbance, a cosmic tremor that resonated even through their slumbering forms. It hinted at a profound connection between the fate of these demigods and the encroaching eclipse, as if their very existence was being stirred by the unfolding celestial drama. Deep beneath the opulent golden facade of Lendel, the royal capital, a hidden catacomb was discovered, a clandestine burial ground concealed from the prying eyes of the Golden Order. Within its shadowy depths, a macabre tableau awaited, numerous maiden corpses, their forms carefully arranged in intricate, unsettling patterns that mirrored the geometry of an eclipse. This was no random burial. It was a ritualistic display, a dark ceremony performed in secret. The precise arrangement suggested a deliberate, calculated act, perhaps an attempt to harness or channel the power of the unfolding celestial event, or perhaps a gruesome sacrifice intended to appease some unknown entity. The discovery of these hidden rituals, involving the sacred figures of the maidens, underscored the growing desperation and radicalization of certain factions within the lands between, willing to transgress even the most sacred taboos in their pursuit of power or understanding. The Golden Order, in its attempts to control the narrative and maintain its authority, moved swiftly to suppress any information that challenged its established doctrines. A particular text, a treatise of Golden Order fundamentalism titled On the Unshadowed Eclipse, was abruptly and thoroughly censored by the Two Fingers. This text, presumably delving into the theological implications of an eclipse that defied conventional understanding, was deemed too dangerous, too heretical, to be allowed to circulate. The censorship was absolute, suggesting that the ideas contained within were not merely speculative, but directly contradicted fundamental tenets of the Golden Order, perhaps even hinting at a weakness or a vulnerability within the greater will itself. The swiftness and severity of the suppression highlighted the growing anxiety within the highest echelons of the Golden Order, indicating that the unshadowed eclipse was not just a celestial event, but a profound theological crisis. As the mysteries deepened, a disturbing observation was made in the treacherous, snow-swept expanse of the consecrated snowfield. A deathbird, one of the grotesque, spectral harbingers of death, was seen carrying a finger maiden's robe. These creatures are intimately tied to the ancient rites of death, predating the Golden Order and its burial practices. The sight of such a creature, typically associated with the burning of the dead and the lingering essence of ancient death rituals, bearing the vestments of a sacred maiden, was deeply unsettling. It suggested a connection between the maidens, their mysterious deaths, and the primordial forces of death that predated the Erdtree's dominion. Was the deathbird merely scavenging, or was it an agent carrying the robe as a trophy, or perhaps even as an offering to some unseen power? The image painted a grim picture of the maidens being drawn into a cosmic struggle far beyond the purview of the Golden Order. Finally, a poignant and cryptic message was left by the creator of the Eclipse Shotel, a unique curved sword imbued with the power of the eclipse. The inscription, etched into the weapon itself, read, "The tree's shadow was never ours to command." This final, desperate declaration spoke volumes. It revealed a profound realization, a moment of clarity for someone who had sought to harness the power of the Erdtree's shadow, perhaps even to control the eclipse itself. The message implied a hubris, a belief that such cosmic forces could be bent to mortal will, only to be met with the crushing reality that the Erdtree's influence, its very shadow, operated on a scale far beyond human comprehension or control. It was a lament, a confession of failure, and a stark warning that some powers, particularly those tied to the very foundations of the world, were not meant to be wielded by mere mortals. The eclipse, it seemed, was not a tool, but a force unto itself, an independent, overwhelming entity. The cryptic reports continued to surface, even as the Golden Order moved to suppress them. A solitary surviving confessor, a master of incantations and incantations, one of the few who still communed directly with the Erdtree's grace, made a chilling report. He spoke of hearing the weeping of two shadows from deep beneath the colossal tree's roots. This was not the mournful cry of a single spirit, nor the wail of a tormented soul, but a dual lament, a synchronized sorrow that resonated with a profound, ancient grief. The confessor described the sound as primal, inhuman, yet filled with an unbearable anguish, a sound that spoke of an unimaginable loss or a dreadful revelation. The implication was clear: something of immense significance, something perhaps even older than the Erdtree itself, was hidden within its deepest recesses, and its suffering was now audible to those attuned to the spiritual currents of the lands between. The two shadows immediately conjured images of the twin birds, the progenitors of the death birds, and their connection to the ancient concept of death itself. Their weeping suggested not just sorrow, but perhaps a reawakening or a reaction to the cosmic disruption of the eclipse. Was this a cry of protest against the shattering of their natural order, or a lament for a deeper, more fundamental truth that had been exposed by the eclipse's unnatural darkness? The confessor's report, initially dismissed as the ravings of a traumatized individual, would later take on a chilling prescience. Adding another layer of dread to the unfolding mystery, observers noted a disturbing phenomenon during the eclipse's peak: the flames of the ghost flame torch, an artifact intrinsically linked to the spectral fires of the death birds and the ancient practice of ghost flame sorcery, burned an unnatural black. Ghost flame, typically a pale, ethereal blue, a manifestation of the spirits of the deceased, was now a void, a negation of light and warmth. This transformation was not a mere dimming, but a fundamental alteration of its very essence, suggesting a profound interference with the natural order of life and death. The blackening of ghost flame, a power derived from the deathbird's dominion over the souls of the dead, strongly implied their direct involvement, or at the very least, a significant reaction from their ancient power. It was as if the eclipse, in its totality, had inverted the very concept of death itself, turning its spectral fires into a symbol of absolute cessation, a void from which no light or spirit could escape. This was not merely an astronomical event, but a cosmic one, touching upon the fundamental forces that governed the lands between. The black ghost flame was a terrifying omen, a visible manifestation of a world out of balance, a world where even the spirits of the dead were consumed by an unnatural darkness. In the aftermath of the eclipse, as the sun slowly began to reclaim the sky, Millennia, the Blade of Michaela, and her elite clean-wrought knights, those who had sworn unwavering loyalty to her, despite succumbing to the scarlet rot, were deployed to the treacherous consecrated snowfield. This frigid, isolated region, shrouded in perpetual blizzards and home to ancient, forgotten powers, was a strategic location for any investigation into cosmic anomalies. The Cleanrot Knights, renowned for their unwavering determination and their ability to withstand the most brutal conditions, were tasked with searching for any lingering traces of the eclipse's influence or any unusual activity that might be linked to its occurrence. However, despite their diligent and exhaustive search across the frozen wastes, they found only frozen, lightless flames. These were not the active, spectral fires of the deathbirds, but inert, petrified remnants, like embers extinguished by an eternal winter. These lightless flames were not merely cold, but utterly devoid of any spiritual energy, any residual warmth that might indicate a lingering presence of ghost flame or any other magical energy. It was as if the eclipse had not merely extinguished these fires, but had drained them of their very essence, leaving behind only hollow husks. This discovery was perplexing. It suggested not a resurgence of deathbird power, but rather a paradoxical absence, a void where ancient forces should have been active. The Cleanrot Knights, accustomed to battling tangible threats, found themselves confronting an enigma, a silent testament to a cosmic event that had left behind only emptiness. Further investigations, though, led to a sealed chamber within a minor Erdtree church, one of the many smaller sacred sites scattered across the lands between, each housing a sapling of the great Erdtree. This particular chamber, long forgotten and undisturbed, yielded a disturbing discovery: a melted finger maiden circlet and a series of meticulously drawn eclipse diagrams etched into the chamber walls. The circlet, once a symbol of the finger maiden's sacred duty to guide tarnished to the Erdtree and ignite their grace, was now a distorted, molten mass, as if subjected to immense heat or an unknown corrosive force. The destruction of such a sacred artifact, particularly in this manner, suggested a violent event, a desecration that went beyond mere neglect. The accompanying eclipse diagrams were even more unsettling. They depicted not just the astronomical alignment, but also intricate patterns of celestial bodies, symbols of unknown origin, and what appeared to be pathways of energy or influence emanating from the eclipsed sun. Some of these diagrams showed the Erdtree itself not as a vibrant source of life, but as a conduit for an external force, or perhaps even as a target. The presence of these diagrams within a sacred Golden Order structure, yet hidden and sealed, indicated a deliberate attempt to conceal this knowledge, or perhaps a pre-existing understanding of the eclipse's true cosmic significance that had been deemed too dangerous to reveal. The melted circlet, juxtaposed with these forbidden diagrams, painted a grim picture of a secret history, a truth about the eclipse that had been suppressed, and perhaps a direct attack on the very foundations of the Golden Order's spiritual authority. The trail of breadcrumbs continued to lead towards the mountaintops of the Giants, a region steeped in ancient history and home to powers that predated the Erdtree. Here, the last known eclipse apostle was found dead, their body frozen solid amidst the unforgiving peaks. The eclipse apostles were a shadowy sect, rumored to have worshipped the eclipse as a divine manifestation, believing it to be a harbinger of a new age or a revelation of hidden truths. The apostles' demise, far from any known conflict, suggested a more mysterious cause, perhaps a direct consequence of the eclipse itself, or a silent execution by those who sought to bury its secrets. Clutched tightly in the apostle's frozen hand was a scroll, its brittle parchment depicting a chilling image: the Erdtree, not as a solid, life-giving entity, but as hollow, a mere shell, with a vast, dark void at its core. This depiction directly contradicted the Golden Order's teachings, which presented the Erdtree as the ultimate source of all life and grace, a symbol of unwavering power and divine presence. The scroll suggested that the Erdtree, the very heart of the lands between, was not what it seemed, that its power might be an illusion, or that it contained a profound, terrifying emptiness. This revelation, if true, would shatter the very foundation of the Golden Order's authority and belief system. The apostle's death, coupled with this heretical scroll, underscored the immense danger associated with understanding the eclipse's true nature. It was a truth deemed so destructive that its proponents were silenced and its evidence meticulously erased. Indeed, shortly after these fragmented discoveries, a systematic purge of all records pertaining to the eclipse was initiated within the Golden Order archives. Scribes and scholars were instructed to remove any mention of the celestial event, any observations, any interpretations, effectively erasing it from the official history of the lands between. This was not a mere oversight or a reinterpretation. It was a deliberate, comprehensive act of historical revisionism, a testament to the Golden Order's fear of the eclipse's implications. The motivation behind this drastic measure was clear. The eclipse, with its unsettling phenomena, its connection to ancient forbidden powers, and its potential to expose fundamental flaws in the Golden Order's narrative, was a threat to their established power and divine legitimacy. The idea that the Erdtree itself might be hollow, or that its grace was not as absolute as proclaimed, was an existential crisis for the ruling deity and their followers. By erasing the eclipse from public consciousness, the Golden Order sought to maintain its illusion of unwavering divine authority and to prevent any questioning of its foundational truths. This act of suppression speaks volumes about the fragility of their power and their desperate attempts to control the narrative, even at the cost of historical accuracy. Even the ancient twin maiden husks, the enigmatic merchants residing in Round Table Hold, those who had witnessed countless ages and held fragments of forgotten lore, briefly alluded to the event. In a rare moment of lucidity, they murmured of the day the guidance flickered before their usual cryptic silence descended upon them once more. The twin maidens, tied to the very fabric of the lands between spiritual currents, were not prone to casual remarks. Their mention of guidance flickered was profoundly significant. Guidance, in the context of Elden Ring, refers to the golden light of grace, the divine favor bestowed by the Erdtree upon the tarnished, leading them towards their destiny. For this guidance to flicker implied a momentary lapse, a brief but terrifying interruption in the Erdtree's divine connection to its chosen champions. It suggested that even the Erdtree itself, the ultimate source of grace, was affected by the eclipse, its power momentarily wavering, its divine light momentarily dimmed. This brief, almost imperceptible admission from the twin maidens, those who embodied the timeless nature of the lands between, was a chilling confirmation that the eclipse was not merely an astronomical anomaly, but a cosmic event that touched upon the very essence of the divine order, shaking its foundations to their core. Their subsequent silence was not just a return to their usual demeanor, but perhaps a deliberate act of self-preservation, or an acknowledgement that the truth of that day was too dangerous to speak aloud. In the present day, the finger readers, those blind seers who commune with the two fingers and interpret their silent pronouncements, claim no memory of the eclipse. When questioned about the event, they respond with vacant stares and genuine confusion, as if the concept itself is alien to them. This collective amnesia among those so intimately connected to the divine will of the greater will, the outer God that governs the two fingers, is deeply unsettling. It suggests not merely a forgotten history, but an active suppression, a mental block imposed by a higher power. It's as if the greater will itself, or its emissaries, has deemed the eclipse too dangerous a memory to retain, too destabilizing a truth for its chosen interpreters to bear. However, despite their conscious lack of recollection, some finger readers unconsciously avoid direct sunlight, seeking shaded areas and expressing an inexplicable discomfort when exposed to the full brilliance of the sun. This subconscious aversion, a primal fear of the very light that was once eclipsed, hints at a deep-seated, buried trauma, a residual memory etched onto their very being, despite their conscious minds being purged of the event. It is a silent testament to the profound impact of the eclipse, a scar on the collective psyche of those who serve the divine, even if they cannot articulate its cause. The only remaining physical evidence of the eclipse, beyond the scattered whispers and suppressed memories, exists in two forms: the eclipse show-tell and scattered, defaced murals found within the treacherous mountaintops of the giants. The eclipse show-tell, a crescent-bladed weapon imbued with the power of ghost flame, is a direct artifact of the eclipse, its very name a testament to the celestial event. Its unique ability to inflict frostbite and ghost flame damage, and its description as a ceremonial sword used in the mausoleum compound, links it directly to the Deathbirds and their ancient rites. The weapon's design, reminiscent of a crescent moon, further reinforces its connection to the celestial phenomenon. It is a tangible, if subtle, reminder that the eclipse was not just a transient event, but one that left behind powerful, enduring relics. The murals in the mountaintops, however, are a more direct and poignant form of evidence. These ancient paintings, etched into the rock faces of forgotten ruins, once depicted the eclipse in its full, terrifying glory. However, they have been systematically defaced, their crucial details scratched out, their central images obliterated, leaving behind only fragmented, ambiguous scenes. This act of deliberate vandalism, clearly carried out by agents of the Golden Order, speaks to the desperation to erase any visual record of the event. Yet, despite the defacement, the very act of attempting to erase them serves as a powerful testament to the eclipse's existence and its profound significance. The remaining fragments, the faint outlines, and the unmistakable signs of deliberate destruction ironically confirm what the Golden Order so desperately sought to deny: that the hidden eclipse was a real, transformative event, a moment when the very fabric of the lands between was irrevocably altered, leaving behind scars that even the most powerful gods could not fully erase. As the shadow of the Erdtree expansion plunges us deeper into the shadowed corners of the lands between, we find ourselves grappling with the profound mystery of Miquella, the unalloyed. Our timeline now shifts to the recent past, specifically during the tumultuous period of the Shattering War, following directly from the ominous events of the hidden eclipse. It is here, amidst the chaos and despair of a fractured realm, that the seeds of Miquella's abduction were sown, leading to consequences that reverberate through the very fabric of the shadow of the Erdtree. Miquella, one of Marika's Empyrean children, born cursed with eternal childhood, had long sought a cure for his own afflictions, and more broadly, for the rot that plagued his beloved sister, Millennia. His efforts led him to establish the Tree, a sanctuary intended to nurture life and provide solace from the oppressive influence of the Golden Order and its Erdtree. However, Miquella, ever the astute observer, began to perceive a deeper, more insidious corruption emanating from the Erdtree itself, a shadowy influence that transcended the familiar Golden Order fundamentalism. It was this realization that spurred his groundbreaking research into what he termed unalloyed gold. This wasn't merely a quest for a personal cure, but a profound endeavor to purify or, at the very least, understand the true nature of this pervasive, shadowy influence. He believed that unalloyed gold, a substance untainted by the greater will's influence, held the key to severing these corrupting ties and perhaps even transcending the very nature of the lands between's divine order. His work at the Tree, therefore, became a crucible of alchemical and spiritual experimentation, a desperate attempt to forge a new path for himself and, by extension, for all who suffered under the Erdtree's shadow. His experiments with unalloyed gold were not without tangible results. Miquella, with his unparalleled intellect and mastery of unalloyed craft, began to produce protective charms. These small, intricate artifacts, imbued with the power of unalloyed gold, were designed to ward off external corrupting forces. This wasn't a theoretical exercise, but a practical application born from a clear and present danger. The existence of these charms strongly suggests that Miquella was not merely hypothesizing about vague influences, but was acutely aware of specific, active corrupting entities or energies at play in the lands between. He understood that the threats extended beyond the more overt forms of the Scarlet Rot or the persecution by the Golden Order. There were subtler, more insidious forces at work, forces he sought to counter with his unalloyed creations. These charms, though perhaps not widely distributed, were a testament to his foresight and his growing understanding of the true nature of the cosmic struggle unfolding around him. They hinted at a world far more complex and dangerous than even the demigods fully comprehended, a world where ancient, shadowy powers vied for influence. Concurrently, and perhaps not coincidentally, a celestial entity known as the Blood Star began to exert its influence over Mog, Lord of Blood. This wasn't a sudden, cataclysmic event, but a gradual, insidious process of manipulation through visions and whispers. The Blood Star, shrouded in mystery and possessing shadowy ties to ancient, forgotten powers, saw in Mog a malleable and ambitious instrument. Its influence was not overtly forceful, but rather a subtle coaxing, amplifying Mog's existing desires and twisting them towards its own enigmatic ends. These visions were not mere dreams, but profound, often disturbing revelations that unveiled a path to power and a destiny separate from the established order. The whispers, insidious and persuasive, spoke of a new dynasty, a new age, and a new god, all under the banner of blood. This celestial entity, whatever its true nature, clearly possessed an agenda that ran counter to the Golden Order and sought to destabilize the existing power structures through its chosen champion. Mog, already a demigod, ostracized and marginalized by the Golden Order due to his Omen heritage and his devotion to the Formless Mother, was particularly susceptible to this influence. Driven by an insatiable ambition, and now further fueled by the Bloodstar's insidious whispers, he began to actively seek to establish a dynasty of his own. This wasn't merely about personal power, it was about forging a new world order, a blasphemous counterpoint to the Golden Order, one rooted in the worship of the Formless Mother and the power of blood. He envisioned himself as the progenitor of a new lineage, a new faith, and a new age, with Miquella, the pure Empyrean, at its heart. Mog's desire for a dynasty was not just a personal craving for power, but a direct consequence of the Bloodstar's manipulation, which promised him a path to godhood and a dominion far exceeding anything the Golden Order could offer. He saw the existing order as corrupt and stagnant, and believed that only through blood and sacrifice could a true and vibrant new age be ushered in. It was against this backdrop of cosmic manipulation and personal ambition that Miquella, in a desperate and profoundly significant act, encased himself in a cocoon at the very heart of the Erdtree. This wasn't a passive retreat but an active, transformative process. His goal was to shed his cursed immortality, the eternal childhood that had plagued him since birth, and to undergo a metamorphosis into a true adult, an Empyrean fully capable of challenging the Erdtree's dominion. He sought to escape the Erdtree's shadow entirely, to break free from the greater will's influence, and perhaps even to ascend to a new form of godhood, one free from the limitations and curses imposed upon him. This cocooning was a gamble, a vulnerable state of profound change, a moment of immense potential and even greater risk. He sought to be reborn, not just physically, but spiritually, to become a being capable of wielding the full power of unalloyed gold and ushering in a truly new age, perhaps even a new outer god. Mog, ever watchful, and now even more acutely attuned to the subtle shifts in the lands between, became aware of Miquella's vulnerable state within the cocoon. The Bloodstar's influence likely played a crucial role in revealing this opportune moment. Seeing Miquella as the ultimate key to his nascent dynasty, Mog began to plot his abduction. He understood that an Empyrean, especially one undergoing such a profound transformation, held immense power and could be molded into the perfect consort for his new blood-soaked order. Miquella, in his vulnerable, transforming state, represented not just a powerful individual, but a symbol, a vessel through which Mog could legitimize his blasphemous ambitions and elevate the Formless Mother to a dominant position. The abduction was not merely an act of capture, but a calculated move to hijack Miquella's metamorphosis and redirect its immense potential towards Mog's own twisted vision. The abduction itself was not a solitary act. Shadowy entities, whose origins and allegiances are still largely unknown, but are strongly suspected to be aligned with the Bloodstar, actively assisted Mug in locating Michaela's cocoon. This suggests a coordinated effort, a deeper conspiracy at play than just Mug's personal ambition. These entities, perhaps agents of the Bloodstar or other ancient malevolent forces, provided intelligence and perhaps even magical assistance, bypassing the Haligtree's formidable natural defenses. Their involvement implies that Michaela's transformation was of interest to more than just Mog, hinting at a broader cosmic struggle for influence over the fate of the Empyrean. The Haligtree, a place of profound magic and divine protection, would have been nearly impregnable to ordinary forces. The successful infiltration speaks volumes about the power and cunning of these shadowy allies. With this crucial aid, Moog and his followers were able to infiltrate the Haligtree. They bypassed its formidable defenses, not through brute force, but through the aid of shadow magic, a dark art likely provided or enhanced by the Bloodstar's influence and its shadowy agents. The Haligtree, a living, breathing sanctuary, was designed to repel intruders. Yet Mog's forces, guided by unseen hands and empowered by forbidden knowledge, navigated its complex pathways and wards with chilling efficiency. This infiltration was a testament to the depth of Mog's commitment and the power of his shadowy benefactors. The very heart of Michaela's sanctuary, a place of purity and growth, was violated by the forces of blood and shadow. Finally, Michaela's cocoon, the vessel of his profound transformation, was stolen from the Haligtree. It was then transported to Mogwin Palace, a hidden underground realm, a blasphemous sanctuary carved out beneath the very foundations of the lands between. This secret journey, undertaken with great care and secrecy, ensured that Michaela's vulnerable state remained concealed from the wider world, preventing any attempts at rescue or interference. The journey itself would have been fraught with peril, but Mog's determination, bolstered by his shadowy allies, ensured its success. The theft of the cocoon was a profound symbolic act, a declaration of war against the established order and a brazen challenge to the greater will itself. Upon arrival, the cocoon was placed in Mugwin Palace's inner sanctum, a place of ritual and dark power. Here, Mog began to perform elaborate rituals, not to harm Michaela, but to bond with his essence. His aim was to intertwine his own bloodline with Michaela's pure Empyrean nature, to become Michaela's consort, and through this union, to usher in a new age of blood and a dynasty under the formless mother. These rituals were designed to corrupt, to twist Michaela's nascent transformation towards Mog's own ends, to make Michaela the god of his new order, a god born of blood and shadow. The fate of Michaela, the innocent Empyrean, now lay in the hands of the blood-crazed Mog, a pawn in a cosmic game far grander and more terrifying than anyone in the lands between could have imagined. This act of abduction and ritualistic manipulation sets the stage for the profound mysteries and revelations that await us in the shadow of the Erdtree. As the shattering war raged across the lands between, a far more insidious conflict was unfolding in the subterranean depths of Mogwin Palace. Michaela, the slumbering Empyrean, became the unwitting focal point of Mog, Lord of Blood's perverse ambitions. Mog's rituals, fueled by a zealous devotion to the formless mother, sought to elevate Michaela to godhood, but not as the benevolent unalloyed gold of his nature intended. Instead, Mog envisioned a twisted union, a new dynasty born of blood and shadow. Yet within Michaela's cocoon, something alien began to stir. Strange, shadowy tendrils, distinct from the familiar golden roots of the Erdtree, began to emerge, writhing with an unnatural vitality. These were not the gentle embrace of the Erdtree's lifeblood, but something altogether different, hinting at an influence beyond the lands between, a cosmic horror beginning to assert itself through the vulnerable Empyrean. Mog's blood communion rituals intensified, a desperate attempt to merge his own tainted lineage with Michaela's pristine Empyrean power. He believed that by offering his blood and the blood of countless others to Michaela, he could awaken him and bind him to his will, thereby elevating himself to consort of a new god. The air within Mogwin Palace grew thick with the stench of iron and the hum of dark incantations. Each ritual was a grotesque parody of a sacred rite, designed to force Michaela's awakening to corrupt his very essence. During these abhorrent ceremonies, the presence of the Bloodstar, a celestial entity that Mog worshipped, grew palpably stronger. Its crimson light, filtering through the cavernous expanse of Mogwin Palace, cast eerie, shifting shadows that defied the warm, golden hue typically associated with the Erdtree. This malevolent starlight seemed to drain the very color from the surroundings, leaving behind a stark, unsettling monochrome, a visual representation of the encroaching corruption. The Bloodstar, for Mog, was a beacon, a guide, and a source of immeasurable power, yet its influence was far from benign. Despite the relentless assault on his being, Michaela's consciousness, though deeply dormant within the cocoon, demonstrated a subtle yet profound resistance to Mog's influence. It was as if his very nature, his unwavering commitment to purity and healing, instinctively recoiled from the vile rituals. This internal struggle manifested externally, causing the shadowy tendrils emanating from the cocoon to writhe and contort with unpredictable violence. They lashed out, striking the cavern walls, leaving deep gouges in the ancient stone, and even recoiling from Mog himself when he drew too near. This unpredictable behavior instilled a creeping unease among Mog's most loyal followers, a silent acknowledgement that Michaela was not merely a passive vessel. Whispers began to circulate among the sanguine nobles and other denizens of Mogwin Palace. The initial fervor and unwavering faith in Mog's vision began to wane for some, replaced by a gnawing doubt. Rumors spread like wildfire, suggesting that the Bloodstar, which Mog had presented as a benevolent guide, was in fact a predatory force, an entity with its own dark agenda, merely using Mog as a pawn in a larger, more sinister game. These whispers were fueled by the increasingly unsettling transformations observed in some of Mohawk's most devoted servants. The sanguine nobles, once proud and fearsome warriors, began to exhibit grotesque signs of corruption. Their bodies twisted and contorted under the relentless gaze of the Bloodstar, their skin growing pallid and translucent, their veins bulging with an unnatural darkness. Some developed additional limbs, others found their voices replaced by guttural roars, their minds slowly unraveling under the pressure of the alien influence. These horrifying changes served as a stark warning, a testament to the true nature of the power Mog was so recklessly wielding. The very essence of their humanity was being devoured, replaced by something monstrous and subservient to the Bloodstar's will. It was in this atmosphere of growing dread and physical degradation that the true patron behind Mog's power began to be understood. The Formless Mother, a deity associated with blood and shadows, a cosmic horror from beyond the lands between, was revealed not as a mere concept or a distant ideal, but as the true orchestrator of Mog's ambitions. The Bloodstar, it became clear, was not the deity itself, but merely a conduit, a celestial manifestation of the Formless Mother's pervasive influence. She was the one who whispered dark promises to Mog, who granted him the power of blood flame, and who ultimately sought to use Michaela as a vessel for her own terrifying rebirth. Her influence was subtle, yet absolute, shaping Mog's every action, every ritual, every twisted prayer. She was the architect of the coming dynasty of blood, and Michaela was to be her unwitting cornerstone. Even within his deep slumber, Michaela's inherent resistance to corruption manifested in subtle ways. Throughout Mogwin Palace, particularly in the chambers surrounding the cocoon, fragments of Michaela's unalloyed gold charms were found scattered. These charms, imbued with Michaela's own pure essence, were known for their ability to ward off outer god influence and curses, a testament to his unique nature. Their presence suggested a desperate, subconscious struggle against the encroaching darkness, a silent battle waged by a sleeping god. Each charm, whether a small medallion or a delicate circlet, served as a poignant reminder of Michaela's true nature, a beacon of purity attempting to resist the overwhelming tide of the Formless Mother's influence. They were the last vestiges of his uncorrupted will, a testament to his enduring power, even in his most vulnerable state. As the Formless Mother's influence deepened and Michaela's internal struggle intensified, the shadowy tendrils from his cocoon began to spread aggressively throughout Mogwin Palace. They were no longer confined to the immediate vicinity of the cocoon, but snaked through the ancient architecture, burrowing into the very foundations of the palace. These tendrils, pulsating with an eerie dark energy, began to subtly alter the palace's structure, twisting its elegant forms into grotesque organic shapes that mirrored the corruption within. Walls became porous and fleshy, adorned with pulsating veins of dark blood. Statues of ancient heroes warped into screaming visages of suffering. The very air grew heavy with a cloying scent of decay and something indefinably alien. The tendrils also began to corrupt the palace's inhabitants, not just the sanguine nobles, but even the lesser servants and creatures that dwelled within. Their minds became clouded, their bodies contorted, their wills subsumed by the pervasive darkness. Mogwin Palace, once a grand subterranean sanctuary, was slowly transforming into a living, breathing testament to the Formless Mother's insidious power, a grotesque monument to her impending dominion. Mog's ambitious plans for his dynasty of blood, once so meticulously crafted, began to falter dramatically. The violent reactions of Michaela's cocoon to his increasingly desperate blood rituals destabilized the entire palace. Earthquakes, localized but powerful, shook the cavernous expanse, causing sections of the ceiling to collapse and vast chasms to open in the floor. The very foundations of Mogwin Palace groaned under the immense strain of the conflicting powers at play. The shadowy tendrils, now fully entwined with the palace's structure, would occasionally lash out with destructive force, tearing through walls and indiscriminately striking down Mog's followers. The grand vision of a unified, blood-soaked empire began to crumble, replaced by chaos and fear. Mog's attempts to force Michaela's awakening were not only failing, but actively destroying the very environment he had so painstakingly built. The Formless Mother's power, channeled through the Bloodstar and Michaela's unwilling vessel, was proving to be a force too volatile, too destructive, even for Mog to control. His dream of becoming the consort of a new god was rapidly devolving into a nightmare, a descent into madness and ruin, all orchestrated by the very entity he so devoutly worshipped. The grotesque mimicry of the Erdtree's roots, formed by the cocoon's shadowy tendrils, wasn't merely an aesthetic horror. It implied a deeply parasitic or adversarial relationship. These shadowy extensions didn't merely look like roots. They seemed to actively seek out and attempt to subvert the very essence of the Erdtree's life-giving power, or at least a dark reflection of it. Within the festering confines of Mogwin Palace, this burgeoning corruption fueled a virulent internal strife among Mog's followers. The debate wasn't about petty squabbles, but fundamental theological schisms. Was the Bloodstar, the celestial body that Mog believed granted him his power and guided his ascent, an ally to the Formless Mother, the outer god Mog worshipped and sought to serve? Or were they competing forces, vying for influence over the nascent Empyrean Michaela and the fate of the lands between. Some acolytes, particularly those who had witnessed the initial surge of the cocoon's shadow, argued that the blood star's luminescence seemed to wane in its presence, suggesting an antagonism. Others, steeped in the more traditional tenets of the formless mother's worship, insisted that the star was merely a distant manifestation of her will, its shifting intensity a sign of her capricious nature, not a conflict. This theological schism led to open disputes, even violent clashes, as factions formed, each interpreting the unfolding cataclysm through their own warped lens of devotion. Mogg, in his singular obsession with Miquella, largely ignored these internal squabbles, viewing them as secondary to his grand design. However, Mogg's attention was soon drawn to a more immediate and pressing concern. During his increasingly desperate attempts to breach Miquella's mental defenses and awaken him, Mogg's diviners and sorcerers, combing through the detritus of Miquella's abandoned research in the Erdtree, discovered his extensive work on unalloyed gold. This wasn't merely a metal to Miquella, it was a conceptual bulwark, an antidote to the outer god's influence, a means to resist the rot of the scarlet Ionia, and by extension, perhaps even the insidious whispers of the formless mother. Mogg, ever the opportunist, immediately recognized its potential. If Miquella had sought to use unalloyed gold to resist external influence, perhaps Mogg could reverse engineer it, or at least synthesize a corrupted version to control the cocoon's shadowy growth. He envisioned a perversion of Miquella's intent, using the very substance designed to purify and resist to instead bind and amplify the shadow, turning it into a weapon of the formless mother. His alchemists and blood sorcerers were immediately put to work, tasked with replicating Miquella's unalloyed gold, or at least understanding its fundamental principles, to gain dominion over the spreading darkness. Their efforts, however, were clumsy and ill-informed, lacking Miquella's profound understanding of the arcane and the subtle interplay of cosmic forces. As the shadowy tendrils continued their relentless expansion, their influence began to seep beyond the physical confines of Mogwin Palace. The cocoon's shadow, a manifestation of Miquella's dormant power, and perhaps his subconscious resistance, began to permeate the lands between's dreamscape. This wasn't a physical invasion, but a subtle, insidious corruption of the collective unconscious, particularly affecting the sleep of those connected to the Erdtree. Tarnished demigods, and even ordinary citizens who drew their life and spiritual sustenance from the Erdtree experienced increasingly vivid and disturbing nightmares. These dreams were often filled with images of encroaching darkness, suffocating roots, and a pervasive sense of dread, a premonition of an impending unseen doom. The Golden Order, already fractured by the shattering war, found its adherents plagued by insomnia and a creeping existential terror. The once comforting visions of the Erdtree, a symbol of life and eternal grace, were now twisted and shadowed in their slumber, mirroring the grotesque tendrils growing beneath Mogwin Palace. This psychological warfare, though unintentional on Miquella's part, further destabilized the already fragile order of the lands between, adding another layer of despair to an already blighted world. Within Mogwin Palace itself, the physical manifestations of the spreading shadow became increasingly dire. The very architecture of the palace, carved from the earth and infused with the formless mother's blood, began to succumb to the parasitic growth. Sections of the palace, particularly those closest to the cocoon, started to collapse under the sheer weight and corrosive influence of the spreading shadow tendrils. Walls cracked, ceilings buckled, and entire chambers were consumed by the encroaching darkness, becoming uninhabitable. The blood pools, once vibrant with the formless mother's power, grew stagnant and murky in the shadow's presence, their crimson hue dulled to a sickly, viscous black. Mogwin Palace, once a symbol of Mogg's burgeoning power and the formless mother's influence, was slowly being consumed from within, a morbid reflection of Michaela's own struggle. The palace's instability became a constant danger for Mog's followers, who now had to navigate a crumbling, shadow infested labyrinth, their fanaticism tested by the very forces they sought to unleash. Despite Mog's increasingly frantic attempts to awaken and control him, Michaela's resistance remained absolute, creating a profound and frustrating stalemate. Even in his cocooned state, Michaela's will, fueled by his Empyrean nature and perhaps his inherent opposition to the outer gods, proved an insurmountable barrier. Mog's blood rituals, his whispered incantations, his attempts to infuse Michaela with the Formless Mother's power, all were met with an unyielding, silent defiance. This resistance wasn't active in the traditional sense. It was a passive, yet immensely powerful rejection of Mog's influence. It was as if Michaela's very being, even in slumber, repelled the alien energies Mog sought to impose. This stalemate prevented the Lord of Blood from fully harnessing Michaela's power, from awakening him as his consort, and from unleashing the full potential of the Formless Mother upon the lands between. Mog, for all his power and ambition, was locked in a cosmic tug-of-war with a sleeping demigod, his grand design perpetually just out of reach. As the shadow from Michaela's cocoon continued to expand and solidify its presence, a curious phenomenon occurred. The Bloodstar's light, which had once cast a malevolent glow over Mogwin Palace, began to dim. It wasn't a sudden extinguishment, but a gradual fading, as if the celestial body itself was repelled by the growing shadow. This was a profound symbolic shift, and one that further fueled the theological debates among Mog's followers. For those who believed the Bloodstar and the Formless Mother were allies, this dimming was a troubling omen, a sign of the Formless Mother's displeasure, or a weakening of her influence. For others, it confirmed their suspicion that the shadow was an antagonistic force, perhaps even a nascent power rivaling the outer gods themselves. Mog, for his part, saw it as a temporary setback, a challenge to be overcome, but even he couldn't ignore the unsettling implications. The very source of his power, the celestial beacon that guided his ambition, seemed to recoil from the burgeoning darkness emanating from Michaela's cocoon, a stark indication that the shadow was a force unlike anything he had encountered before. Driven to desperation by the dimming Bloodstar, the crumbling palace, and Michaela's unyielding resistance, Mog resolved to perform one and final, desperate ritual. This was to be his magnum opus, a culmination of all his blood magic and devotion to the Formless Mother, designed to break Michaela's will and finally awaken him as his divine consort. The ritual was performed in the deepest, most sacred sanctum of Mogwin Palace, a place already scarred by the creeping shadow. Mog, surrounded by his most fanatical acolytes, invoked the Formless Mother with unprecedented fervor, channeling every ounce of his power into the arcane rite. However, Michaela's passive resistance, amplified by the burgeoning shadow, proved too great. Mog's final ritual failed catastrophically. Instead of awakening Michaela, it triggered a violent, uncontrolled eruption of blood and shadow. The very ground beneath their feet convulsed, and torrents of crimson, infused with the black tendrils of the cocoon's shadow, burst forth from the earth, scarring the palace's sanctum with an indelible mark of failure and chaos. The explosion was not merely destructive, it was a perverse fusion of the Formless Mother's blood and Michaela's nascent shadow, a terrifying testament to the conflicting powers at play. Many acolytes were consumed in the cataclysm, their bodies dissolved into the swirling vortex of blood and darkness. Mog himself, though surviving, was severely wounded, his divine ambition momentarily shattered.